spectral abominations haunt the minds of the weak and innocent. Plagues of ethereal visions cause disruptions and rip the veil of the beyond. The Mystic Archives, branch of the Obscura Mystica Foundation. Location: Potter's Hill. Objective: pursue, investigate, eradicate. All anomalies are connected. The ethereal realm is thinning. Time is short.
Like this? Yeah, it's on now.
It's a simple setup, Apprentice Emmett.
Do you really have to call me that?
We are now recording, so we must refer to each other professionally.
I didn't realize it was this serious. I mean, you were a lot more excited when I was hired and...
As part of Obscura Mystical Foundation, you are considered my apprentice. You must take this role seriously. Additionally, my voice is altered so that no unsavory people may locate us, as we are currently in an investigation stage for peculiar supernatural incidents.
Right. I'm sorry. Are we ready for the report then?
Yes. And also let it be known that the Foundation has supplied us with transcripts of the victims of various paranormal incidents and strange anomalies concerning the town of Potter's Hill. After all, Apprentice Emmett, what is our calling when it regards the Foundation?
Pursue, investigate, eradicate. Sir. I mean, Mr. Steele.
Please, no banter with names other than the ones that we will be reading from. They have come to us for help, and we must record everything for the Foundation.
Yes, sir. I'll remember that. So, should we begin then?
Commence the first session of the year, Apprentice Emmett.
Just one other thing, sir. You have it marked as entry 004. Shouldn't we start with 1? It would make more sense.
There were a few other incidents, minor and most likely a trick from pranksters, or they have clear logical explanations. Begin with entry 004 now, before I lose my patience.
Okay. Entry 004 involves a couple that is not from Potter's Hill, but an anomaly was detected and red flagged by the Foundation for many reasons. This incident is about Samuel, known mostly as Sam, and his fiancée Cassandra, known mostly as Cassie. It will be told from the viewpoint of Cassie. My fiancé Sam and I were driving cross country. We had a week and a half off of work, which was a miracle on its own, but we figured we should give it a shot since we both love traveling in the outdoors. We were running low on gas and were in the middle of nowhere. No offense. This place is literally out here with nothing around, except for the mountains and forests. Anyway, Sam and I spotted a single gas station as we were driving, and since this town was still a few miles away, we figured we might as well just pull in there. Nearly broken down with none of the outside lights working, weeds growing out of the cracked cement, and through the shattered windows. This gas station was straight out of a horror movie. Is this the station off Highway 12?
No distractions during the story, Apprentice Emmett.
Right. I'm sorry. I'm just wondering. I told Sam to fill up quickly and don't go inside if you can avoid it. Well, of course, these pumps were, I guess, an older sort, I suppose, where we couldn't really pay at the pump. Sam was a little nervous, too, and it's difficult to have Sam in an uncomfortable position. Normally, he's very confident and level-headed, but this place was different. An odd sensation settled in the air, like we were being watched by the air itself. I'm not sure really how to describe it. I suppose it's an unsettling paranoia that lingered even after we fueled up. So Sam had to go inside. He looked left and right several times, even though there was absolutely no one, and no one was going to pull up either. He went inside, and later, when he came back, he said to me that he's only putting $10 in, that he doesn't want to be there. I asked what the matter was, but he only shook his head and darted his eyes around as if expecting somebody or something to pop out. He turned to the pump to pump the gas, and as soon as we did, something really did pop out. From around the corner of the gas station was an old woman. She was dressed all in black, which was strange because it was nearly 90 degrees out that day. She had some sort of cloak with the hood resting on her curved back. She hunched when she walked, or more like hobbled. She had a cane that had definitely seen better days. But what bothered me were two certain things. First, she had no shoes. Hobbling and scuffling through the dirt, grass, and even the cracked cement in bare feet, all under blistering heat. But it didn't seem to annoy her, which bothered me. The second thing that was disturbing, I think, was her face. Extremely pale. Her face was full of wrinkles and, well, she smiled. Though, from what I could see, there weren't many teeth left, and those that had been left, well, they were discolored to the point of rot and decay. But she kept on smiling and staring. That creepy stare she had. She never blinked, not once. And her eyes were glossed over, like a gray mist that covered the regular colors of her eyes. So she was staring at Sam from around the corner, shuffling through the rough surfaces and never blinking. I tapped at the window for Sam to notice. He had barely finished fueling up before he turned and saw her too. At first, Sam wasn't really worried. He thought it was just another customer that he might have missed inside. But the longer he looked at her, the more concerned he got. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman said nothing, but rather than a smile, it shifted to something like an angry shout, except nothing came out. Silence. Her face formed into an angry expression, but still never blinked. Sam said that she was breathing, ever so slightly, like she had trouble breathing or something was caught in her throat. Either way, Sam slid into the car seconds before the woman simply bumped into our car. And then I saw her drag her fingernails on the windows. Chipped and yellowed, they seemed like they were scratched off, as if she had been digging or clawing at something for a while now. Sam started the car and hesitated on if we should leave her there, out in the middle of nowhere, or just take her to a safe place in the nearest town. I told him he was crazy to think about it. She was demented or under some kind of drug, I'm not sure. But his answer came soon when the woman slammed her fist down on the window and it cracked. That sudden thud made both of us jump. The window didn't shatter, thank goodness, but the crack is still there, along with the trauma. Sam peeled out of the station and back onto the road. We didn't say anything at first, but, then we began to laugh it off. It was maybe just a weird person in a weird place. So what? We kept on driving and saw a few signs for the towns up ahead. Bakersfield, I think one was. And once we'd get there, he told me we'd fill up all the way and skip through the rest of the state. Well, if we thought that gas station felt abandoned, this next town of Bakersfield was a ghost town. The roads were empty, scattered with weeds and grass that signified that no one was taking care of anything around there. Rusted cars parked along the sides of in the front of broken down and closed stores. Doors were locked, windows busted in. I told Sam that there would be no help for us here. We should just take our chances and leave. Sam was being stubborn, though, and I could see the look of suspicion and caution growing in his eyes. I caught a glimpse of movement a couple times. A silhouette, or shadow, darting or moving from one building to the next, but always in a shadowed alley, or in the last second, cornering around a wall. It unnerved me, and I urged Sam just to, drive through and forget this. But that was when he saw something unexpected, and I saw it too. Panic swelled up inside. An entire group of people were standing completely still in the middle of the road. Sam slammed on his brakes. We both tried to study the people for a few seconds, My heart dropped when I saw the similarity between every single one of them. Their faces. They were all the same. And I don't mean they looked similar, like they were, part of some huge family. No, each and every one of their faces were identical to the old woman at the station. Pale, wrinkled, and of course, none of them blinked. And they all began with that same eerie smile. All eyes on us, those gray, veiled, cursed eyes staring us down. The shock of it had both of us sitting still until instinct just suddenly kicked in and Sam began to shift into reverse. Only he began to before hitting the brakes again. More people began to file out of the empty buildings and worn down houses. They were all advancing towards us when we heard them chant something. I'm not really sure what it was. Latin? Sam didn't recognize it, and neither did I. But it was in unison, like some sort of inverted prayer, focused to cause us harm and probably worse than that. I knew it was in a different language, though, because I couldn't hear any familiar words, not one. Well, as Sam tried to drive in any direction, the staring people just got closer, until suddenly we just all heard a loud sound from far away. It was the sound of a low note on a horn, a brass horn, maybe a trumpet or tuba, or perhaps maybe just a combination of both. We're not even sure. But that note was ominously loud, and it echoed through the streets. There was a moment of stillness. Sam's heavy breathing matched mine while we sat vulnerable in our car. The staring people suddenly turned in the direction of the mountain, far away, and began to shuffle away, grumbling and gargling until none of them were left in the streets. And I could have sworn that I saw a tiny fire up in that mountain too, but Sam immediately had put the car in drive and sped away in dust clouds. I tried to spot anyone else in that town and fear that one of them might be hiding, but I couldn't see anything else. We drove for a couple hours, passing the tiny towns with open eyes, until we came to Potter's Hill, here. When we spotted the busy gas station with normal people, we breathed a sigh of relief, and oddly enough, we actually heard some locals about your group. I think it was Sam who mentioned Bakersfield to some random guy who, I guess, saw us in a state of panic and was kind enough to lend a hand if needed. He told us about a psychic group, I'm assuming what you two are, that's investigating the disappearances in Potter's Field, and they'd be the ones to tell our story to. And, well, here we are, reporting our very, very strange incident. I know that a lot of people might think we're delusional, or we made it up. There can't be anything that happens like that, right? The same face on so many people, and being called to the mountain by a horn note in unison? I don't know, it's just all so weird and creepy. Sam and I agreed to never go through these parts again. No offense again. It's far too dangerous. And that's all that I have. You don't suppose, sir, that there are, well, skinwalkers around here?
Local folklore can stretch the imagination, especially when it comes to tales like this. Skinwalkers, a possibility. They're elusive, Apprentice Emmett, and cannot be caught or kept behind a cage for experiments. The skinwalkers around Potter's Field are a different breed than what folklore talks about. Instead, they are spirits of the vengeful side of nature, taking away the sanity of human minds, forcing them into their primitive instincts rather than the cognitive problem-solving that we are gifted with.
So, you don't think it's skinwalkers? It seems very much like them, but I'll have to get back into the books after this case. I won't be going down that highway anytime soon.
And it's best that you take precaution like that. Although our task is to find out what these paranormal incidents are and eradicate the vile forces that be, we must both be wary of our surroundings. The mountains are a dangerous place. If those same face-staring people are called to the mountain, that means two things for certain, at least for me. There is something evil going on at the foot of the mountains. And second, that we must be the ones to find its secrets. that it is 10 o'clock at night. Now, have you begun the recording?
Yes, sir, I have. Why do we need to have to note the time? With odd suspicions and the like, I know about the whole witching hour theory, so is it like that?
Similar to it. Once sunset has arrived and night has officially settled in, there is a rather unusual sensation to the air around Potter's Hill, an ancient breath that could whisper horrors from all the evils it has seen.
If only we could ask it, sir.
This is no laughing matter, Apprentice Emmett. The mountains are old, and the woods hide their secrets. And with that being said, perhaps we should settle into our next entry. After all, it is set in the nearby forest.
Very true, sir. Okay. We, being Emmett Johnson and...
Not so loud! They might hear us. Remember, the night brings peculiar events, and with proper auras, hidden voices.
Of course, sir. I'm trying my best. I'll get the hang of it one day, perhaps.
Then let's hope it's tonight. Commence entry number 005 when you are ready.
The Obscura Mystica Foundation has provided entry 005 to us as an important piece of information regarding the town of Potter's Hill. This occurred around 7 years ago, but the victim of this odd supernatural anomaly is still alive, though his mental stability has steeply declined since the incident and resides in a mental institution about 20 miles away. Are you sure we can actually tell his story?
If the Foundation has given it to us, we are allowed to tell his story. Continue, please, or else the night will grow old along with me.
Right. Sorry, sir. This incident happened to one Jason Hansen. The story was written by Jason, so it will be from his point of view. It was a fall weekend when I decided to plan out a hiking trip on my own. I know I've heard a lot of stories about lone hikers getting lost in the woods or even being murdered at night. The scary stuff that keeps people up at night. But I was young and felt brave and wanted to spend some more time in nature. Just me and the trees while I walked at my own pace up the slopes of a mountain. It felt so incredible just thinking about it, even before the trip. I had spent the last couple of years working every day with overtime on top of that. I had my local bike trails and a nice river nearby, but nothing beats the adventure when you're really outdoors in the thick woods, wandering the trails of animals rather than humans. And that's what I wanted, a break from reality. To hear the quiet whispers of the wind, listen to the small chitters of songbirds or the screeches of owls and hawks, the rushing water of clear streams rippling over loose stones and... getting lost in that sense of ultimate relaxation, at least for me. Anyway, after I had planned my weekend vacation for Potter's Hill, this small town by the mountains that I had really only heard in passing, I was anxious to begin. Arriving at the woods wasn't anything weird. There was an outdoor shelter area with a small family, a bunch of couples that were arriving or departing from the main trails, and I even spotted a group of bikers doing some sort of marathon. With a bright sunny day and a slight breeze through the green leaves and packed branches, it was the perfect morning to set out. Following along the main path for about half an hour, there were joggers and bikers and dog walkers alike. It was fine, but then I found the first off-trail path. No signs or markers, just a path that veered off into the woods. I immediately took a fast pace through it, and before long, the talking of people and barking of dogs were replaced with the songs of birds and the rustling of squirrels. I took my time with my pace now, since it was just me. But then, out in the middle of this path with no one around, I heard what sounded exactly like footsteps right behind me. I turned around instinctively and found nobody. I could have sworn I heard those footsteps, like heavy boots stomping on the solid earth. I continued on, and it happened again almost right away. Turning again, I saw no one. It honestly freaked me out, and so I began to run. Panic built up. And the footsteps were still close, and they were matching my stride. I broke into a sprint, and even that didn't help. The footsteps were right behind me. And that's when I tumbled off a steep hill and rolled down until I slammed right into a tree. The impact alone made my body ache and nearly took the wind out of me. But the footsteps had stopped, and I was breathing heavily, trying to realign myself and take some replenishing sips of water. My whole head was just buzzing from adrenaline and the heat. After a while, I stood up and studied my surroundings. Still part of the forest, and the sun was going down soon. It was strange. I thought I'd just begun down that main trail. I wondered if I really did hit my head that hard and time passed by. Thinking about that just freaked me out. I went back up to the top of that steep hill that I fell down and saw the path wasn't there anymore. None of my shoe prints were there, and not even the naturally carved indent of a deer path that I had followed. I couldn't let myself panic any further and just decided to make camp at the foot of that small cliff. At least I didn't have to worry about intruders in that direction. I had barely set up my tent and started a tiny fire when the sun finally went down. And when it did, all the sounds went out. No owls, no bats, no wind through the canopies, no babbling streams to let me know there was something or anything besides me and the trees. That silence was ominous. During that night, I tried staying up as long as I could, but my body was so worn out that eventually I did pass out, and to my mistake, with the tent flap slightly open. It was in the middle of the night, maybe around 3 or 4, that a weird sound woke me up. It was like a choked call, gargled and quiet, but it sounded like it was coming from around a tree in front of my tent. After that sound came an eerie whisper, or one that resembled one. It was dry and scratchy and didn't say any words, but maybe it was trying to. A bad representation of short words. I couldn't understand what it was saying. I had closed my tent door and took out my hunting knife and flashlight. Now, I was awake, wide awake, and I couldn't let whatever it was out there to kill me. It was a horrible time until morning came. I heard the same sounds twice before everything suddenly resumed to its normal state. Birds chirped at sunrise, animal movement along hidden trails, and the bright sunlight streaming through the leaves. I hesitated for a moment after I packed up my equipment on whether or not to pack up the tent. Eventually, I did begin to unfold the tent, but there was another slightly odd incident. When I was folding the last flap together, a sudden gust of cold wind blew it up, and where I totally swore that I saw a shadow of a hand gliding down the fabric. But when I got the tent together, nothing was there. I sped up that same hill and began to follow my compass west. At least I had an actual direction. For now. I tried following what I guess was the original path from the day before, but it led me to a wide stream, almost a river, where piles of large flat rocks jutted into the water. I walked up to the edge and splashed my face with the cold water. It felt refreshing, but even that slight second moment where my eyes were closed, I had that creeping paranoia that someone was behind me, watching my every move. I checked my compass again. Still headed west, even though no signs of trails or people were here. I went on feeling a little hazy in the head. Maybe I was just confused and mixed with the heat and last night's encounter. My mind was playing with me. That kind of came into play too when I came across the same rock formation nearly an hour later. The same stacked rocks, the same gentle stream. Everything was exactly as it was when I had splashed my face earlier. I panicked and checked my compass again. Still pointed to west. But when I moved my body around, the compass remained pointing west. No way I had gone in circles. I was an experienced hiker, and this didn't happen. And then, of course, while I was panicking and spitting around like an idiot, I heard that same gargled voice from the night before, closer this time, and I could hear its raspy breath following after its strange call. This time, I barely saw it, but it was something. A thin gray arm reached around a faraway tree. Its fingers were thin, and it had black talons as fingernails. I only saw it for a few seconds before the hand curled away and vanished behind the tree. That sent me into survival mode. If I hadn't been heading west, then perhaps I could change my course and go opposite. I didn't need my compass anymore if it didn't work. I crossed the stream around noon, as the sun was at its highest, and plunged back into the woods. I knew that great creature was following me now. I knew I couldn't sleep that night. I knew I was being hunted. The rest of that day was normal. No weird noises, no guttural calls, no creepy taloned hands. But as time does, day shifted to evening, and sunset was close. I kept my knife close, and regretted that I didn't take my gun this time. Normally I'd choose not to, but of course now it was a vital mistake. Just like before, the sounds of the forest gradually softened until only my footsteps could be heard. There was wind, but I couldn't hear it in the trees. There was water nearby, but no noises of its currents. Dead quiet, except for me. And then I suddenly had an idea. It was crazy because I knew I was being hunted, but I tried it anyway. I stopped in my tracks, standing completely still, and slowed my heavy breathing. Waiting ever so patiently, I eventually heard the same awful gurgling sound and the same raspy whisper, trying to say words but never getting them out. And then I finally saw it, the creature that was hunting me. I saw it first from the corner of my eye, the same gray arm with black taloned fingers. Only this time, the creature came out and began to crawl on all fours. It was humanoid in form, 2 arms and 2 legs, but it still crawled on all fours. It had pale skin, but in the shadows it was more like an icy blue. It had loose, stringy black hair, and it always had its jaw open, a black hole with a row of jagged teeth, dripping with drool. And its eyes were not normal. In fact, I don't even recall seeing actual eyes. It was more like it had sockets that dug into the skull. The eyeball itself was vacant. As I watched it, I studied the breathing pattern. The gurgling sound was its exhale, and the creepy, raspy voice was its inhale. I watched it crawl on the ground, sniffing the soil and sticks. It was looking for me through scent and sound. I suppose since I was in the forest for so long that the smell of leaves and trees was all around me. After a long time that felt like hours, I saw it crawl into something in the distance. A hut made of mud and sticks, dug into the roots of a tall oak tree. There was even a small door that the creature swung open and shut, and I thought I saw tiny windows too. On the door was this weird symbol, painted in red. 2 triangles. The top one was upside down with the point down, while the bottom was right side up. A line was drawn straight through both triangles, and the bottom sides of the triangles jutted out irregularly, but I wasn't there long to see the fine details from inside that hut. Once I saw a tiny fire light from within, and the door swinging shut, I booked it to any direction away from that cursed land. Maybe it was luck or some sort of divine intervention that eventually, on the sunrise of the next morning, I quite literally stumbled upon a road. But of course, even before that, I heard that same pattern of footsteps right behind me. I didn't hear that creature's voice or sounds, but the footsteps were there. I ran as far and as fast as I could, and ultimately took another tumble down a steep hill, where I rolled and tumbled until I hit something hard on flat ground. The rough road of the local highway. I looked up and saw nothing following, but I still ran down the road until a truck driver spotted me and gave me a lift to Potter's Hill. That entire day I had to gather myself. It took all day to make sense of it all. I still had to get back to my car, parked right outside those woods. But did I really want to? Did I want to risk that entity stalking me if I came close to the woods? Well, perhaps my car is still there, because I didn't go back. I never returned. Now, the Mystica Obscura Foundation has provided us with further information regarding Jason Hansen as he was locked up in the asylum. Again, are we allowed to...
It is part of our assignments to read the full report. Go on, Apprentice Emmett. We must know what happened to this poor soul.
I suppose, sir. Nearly a week after this incident with the great creature, Jason Hansen was handed over to the asylum for peculiar behaviors. Some of these behaviors escalated to violence on a paranormal scale: levitation, unusual strength, and the ability to talk in tongues. These traits are among those of spiritual possession, though others may scoff at the idea. However, within the babbling speeches and horrible echoing screeches, there came a certain series of words. I hunger. I crave. I devour. Mr. Hansen remains locked away, whispering this phrase only once a day at 3:07 a.m. precisely. We have yet to understand the meaning of this. And that's all we have for entry 005 and the information regarding Jason Hansen. Was he really, possessed by this great creature? And what is it exactly?
There are some entities which the Foundation has not yet named officially because its skills are too elusive and their sightings just as rare. But from what I have heard, one member of the Foundation called it the Eyeless. It is possible that this so-called eyeless creature stalked this man to feed on his fear. But the possession traits puzzle me.
Well, there were the footsteps, and the unseen wraiths tend to track fear and negative auras around a person to feed on that before possession sets in. Maybe it was that. But why would it ally with this eyeless creature?
Is a good assumption, Apprentice Emmett. Misguiding the hiker was its key feat in finding that panic, leading to fear of the unknown and the unseen. After all, the deepest terror is in what we cannot see, and in addition to what we imagine what's out there in the shadows.
Did you hear that?
The night air adds suspicion and caution when telling supernatural tales. Things our minds trick us into believing what's real and what's fiction.
So then you didn't hear it?
Whatever you heard, you may mention it after our entry recording.
Yes, I suppose we should. Just one more thing to note, sir. That highway he mentioned, perhaps it was the same one from the previous entry. There's really only one highway close to Potter's Hill, and it crosses near the mountain and through the woods, too. I wonder if that relates somehow. I'll do some digging into that and give an update once I find out more. This town has a really eerie aura.
Indeed, it does. Whatever lurks in this area tends to hide in the woods. What lies in the mountains and at the foot of them is a mystery, one that we must find out soon before any more victims succumb to a lure of the unknown.
Now recording our latest entry for the Mystic Archives, branch of the Mystica Obscura Foundation. It is 11:14 p.m. on a Saturday night, where there is a crescent moon. This marks a significant night as some specific entities are better summoned on crescent moons. Anything else I should add, Mr. Sir?
Nothing to add yet. Our last entry seemed to have a few difficulties, but we managed to get past that. The crescent moon may actually guide us in this session, if the clear vial has been set out on the windowsill.
Yes, the moon water is there, sir. I also went back into the books of obscure creatures and beings after re-listening to the past entries. Now, entry 004 has a few solutions, as we guessed, but I had forgotten about doppelgangers. So, along with skinwalkers, those same-face people can have a possibility of being a crowd of missing doppelgangers.
It's another good assumption, Apprentice Emmett. There are only a few skin-changing entities, and as for the last entry, we ended up settling on a wraith as the unseen stalker and the odd eyeless creature from the Foundation's database.
insidious beings that stalk through the forest in the day and run rampant in the night. It's all so eerie.
The night brings many spirits forth, even without incantations.
There! Did you hear it that time?
Yes, I did. But it was only a whisper.
Only a whisper? That's something. That's proof of the paranormal, sir.
And the paranormal is all around us, Apprentice Emmett. In the ether, in the unseen air that separates mortality and the in-between. What draws them forth can be many things, or nothing. Let that be remembered. But now we must get to the entry. We cannot have this back and forth talk for far too long. The hidden shadows listen intently.
Yes, we should start. Sorry, I got carried away there. Just everything surrounding Potter's Hill is so different from what I'm used to. The atmosphere is heavy. The mist is thick.
Then let's hope that mist does not come to greet us. Begin the entry, please.
Of course, sir. Right away. Entry 007 was provided by a local teenage boy very recently and will be submitted into the Obscura Mystica Foundation here in Potter's Hill, therefore pending approval by the Foundation until they hear and review it. This happened 2 nights ago at the time of this recording, so the story is still fresh in our memories, and thankfully the young man had enough to talk about and not get too scared. This story happened to one Jeremy Stockton, and I will be telling it through his point of view. This was last weekend, literally 2 days ago. I was actually too scared to tell anybody about this story. I knew my parents wouldn't believe me about the thing that I saw. The break-in was real, and everything but the cause of it was just so strange. I still have trouble believing it myself. Well, I suppose I should go back to the start before I reveal anything else. It was on a Friday night when the first traces showed up. I was alone for the weekend. My parents went out on their monthly trip together. A quick getaway for the two of them before coming back on Sunday. It's a nice routine of theirs. And I was pretty excited to have the house by myself for the weekend, to be honest. Staying up all night, playing games, blasting my own music for a change, things like that. So my parents left for the weekend, and by the time I had played some games, it was nearing sunset. I decided to watch a movie that night. Of course, I had to pick a paranormal horror one. I thought it'd be fun to watch one with the windows open. See, our house is right next to one of the largest forests in the area, so with that kind of ambience, it was really great. And, well, I do admit that I actually did have a few drinks. Not much, of course, but I did have some. Eventually, after the movie, I put another one on and ultimately fell asleep in the middle of it. It was probably around midnight or 1 a.m. when I woke up. The movie had ended and was back at the main menu when I stretched and stood up. At first, the open windows did freak me out, but I remembered I left it like that on purpose. But it's definitely something I'll never do again. When I finally regained my senses, I saw something that sent shivers up my spine. Faint fingerprints on the window. Not on the inside, as if I had slid them open or shut, but instead it was on the outside, like somebody had been watching me this whole time that I was asleep. The dark trees beyond waved crazily in the high winds that were not expected for that night. The night sky gave me no comfort as the moon's light shone on those eerie fingerprints. I slid the curtains shut immediately with my breath quickening. Panicked, I checked the front door at once. It was locked. I worriedly peered through the peephole, half expecting to see some scary face looking back at me, but nothing was there. Looking around the room, there wasn't really anything odd or out of place, until I saw a pair of scissors that was left on the coffee table next to the couch where I was lying down. At first I walked up to it without thinking, assuming that I just had to use it to open a box or something, but eventually I saw tiny strands of my hair. Small pieces of my hair. I was so freaked out and I dropped the scissors. I raced over to the nearest mirror and saw that a chunk of my hair from the backside was cut unevenly. Everything was just going from bad to worse. Well, it had gotten worse when I froze in my tracks to see that the back door was open and the kitchen floor space that it led from had fresh, wet prints. It came from outside and the footprints went upstairs, where the carpeted steps were now wet. I slammed the back door, locked it, and almost went up to check on the stairs before I turned around and grabbed a big knife. I had to defend myself somehow. Some places of the carpeted stairs were still wet from those weird footprints until I couldn't follow them anymore once I was fully upstairs. I stood still for a long moment, silent and scared. But the further I checked each room, quietly peeking in and turning on literally all the lights, the more relaxed my body was. There wasn't a single sound except my own. But holding that knife with quivering hands eventually made me more scared than an actual intruder. So I suppose my body wasn't entirely relaxed. But when all the rooms were checked, and even inside the garage, I stayed up for the rest of that night in fear, waiting for a sound or watching for any movements. The sun's light in the morning gave me a huge relief. But my parents weren't going to be home until the next day, so I had to brace myself for another long day and probably a painful night ahead. I was against calling the police that night, too. All that was there to report was an open door and wet footprints that faded really quickly, and scissors with my hair on it. Felt a little too convenient, I guess. Well, that day I spent it all inside since the doors were all shut and locked, and the windows all closed with the curtains drawn open. If there was going to be an intruder again, I might possibly see them attempt to enter. For once in a long time, I actually read a book, instead of focusing all my attention to a screen. With the book in hand, I could at least see somewhat all around me. Eventually, the dreaded sunset time arrived and I closed the curtains. No one arrived. I dared to put on the TV, but with very low volume. And the waiting was the worst at that moment, but nothing prepared me for my lack of protection when I heard a shuffling sound from above. The upstairs again. It sounded like someone was walking around slowly, almost dragging their feet or hauling something heavy. Grabbing the knife as before, I went up the stairs quietly and listened. The moment of realization made my heart drop to my stomach. The sounds were upstairs, yes, but further up. The attic. I hadn't checked the attic at all the other night. Walking over to the next hallway, I swallowed hard with absolute fear. The latch door to the attic was inched open. More sounds of the footsteps made me grasp and retreat a few steps back. The feet paused at my reaction. There was a long silence before they marched on again. I could have sworn that I heard some weird gurgling sound too, like something was caught in someone's throat. Eventually, I got the courage to carefully lean down the ladder of the attic, all the while listening to heavy breathing in that dark space. But when I began to climb up the ladder, I saw a faint light up there. Hesitating, I finally peered up into the attic, and what I saw there, I will never forget. It's just too abnormal to believe in. From the farthest corner of the attic space, there was, well, what I guessed to be a pale man with long, stringy black hair. He was hunched over with his back turned against me. Red candles were set all around him in random patterns, even in stacks, but as I looked closer, specific candles were set in a circular pattern. These candles were black and were taller than the others. Beneath the circular set candles were lines of white chalk, where the man was hunched over in the center of it. And I know I sound really crazy when I say this, but I thought I saw another figure, but it was made of black mist, standing above the man, as if it were coming out of the floorboard itself. It made no sound. It only hovered above him and watched him silently. I thought by now the man would know I was there, or perhaps he already did and didn't care if I was present or not. He began to eat something that I couldn't see, but his arms, from what I could see, were bent like he was holding something in front of him, and he began making a loud devouring sound. I nearly backed away when he slightly turned his head to the side. I couldn't see his eyes, but I knew he was aware of me. Almost deliberately, he took something small in his crooked fingers. I squinted my eyes and began to panic as my heart rate skyrocketed. It was the chunk of hair that I was missing. With wide eyes, I watched him take the hair and slowly, very gradually, ate that too. Thin strands of hair mixed with the strange substance he was eating. At that point, I had enough. I couldn't let this deranged man capture me or for that odd, misty figure to study me. I was scared out of my mind. The man went back on being hunched over and making loud munching sounds while I slid down the ladder and ran to get out of the house. Each room made me feel like that man was just crawling around in the corner or that misty figure would pop out unexpectedly. Nothing happened, fortunately, and in the middle of the night, I had to run over to my neighbor's house. With a panicked expression and me stumbling over a lot of words, the neighbors called the police to report a break-in. I spent the night retelling my story to them and saw in their face the regret for calling the police. They thought I was crazy. Probably should have left out the dark, misty figure. That was when they didn't believe me. Well, the police did eventually arrive, and to the neighbor's surprise, the police did find the candles and chalk left over in the attic space. After I told them where to look specifically, any traces of the man, though, couldn't be found. Just the items left in the attic. I remember the man only wore some sort of cloth as his pants. He didn't wear any shirt, and I could see his thin body with his bones and his spine nearly poking through. It was a horrific sight. When my parents got home, they initially didn't believe me either, but after speaking with the police about the matter, they were worried and checked the attic themselves. They found burn marks where the candles were, and the chalk was stained, but my dad had said that he knew immediately that it was some kind of dark ritual. Esoteric symbols were etched into the wood in between the chalk lines and left in the candle wax from the tall black candles. It was such a horrific event, and I'm still traumatized by it. Like most people who don't really believe in the paranormal stuff, my parents told me to stay away from spiritual matters like rituals and summoning. Well, I had to get my story out to someone who would listen, and that's where I found out about you two. I heard of a duo investigating strange events around Potter's Hill, and, I think it's been happening a lot recently, and I'm beginning to worry. I think the whole town is paranoid now. Something isn't right.
A much darker story than I assumed it would be. This ritual that the man was performing was not just one of conjuration, but connecting with malevolent fields of the beyond. He has torn through the veil. This is bad news.
Torn the... You mean the veil into the beyond can be torn from the in-between?
Not entirely. But if a willing soul from the mortal plane goes through the dark rituals and sacrifices their body for evil spirits to invade, then yes, the veil can be torn through, and only with mortal assistance.
Then we need to pursue this teenager further, along with the location of this ritual. It'll be a step closer to find the source of darkness around Potter's Hill. This is actually a huge lead for us.
It is indeed. Pack your things for necessary involvement of the spiritual field, and if things go south, of potential possession. We are going at once.
Oh, right. Do I... I don't know how to go about this, but I'm not recording this session with Mr. Steele right now because, he's talking to himself and ranting about something in the next room.
In the woods, that ritual, that hidden figure, Balthazar, the red moon, black candles, it all makes sense.
I'm not sure what he means by the red moon, but the name of this Balthazar is seriously bad news. A demon that doesn't possess people, but one that causes chaos and mischief in order to have lesser legions of demons possess the innocent. Whatever ritual this...
My sources are lacking credibility. Return to my hill soon.
I'm not sure what he means by his hill. Mr. Steele is acting odd tonight, before our next entry recording. But I suppose the stress and paranoia is getting to him. I'm a little anxious myself.
Missing a page. My book. I must return to the studio. Emmett will be worried if we lose this lead.
Update over. Tonight's session will be less of an entry and more of what we have gathered over the last few weeks. Together, we've researched the history of the town of Potter's Hill and came up with some unusual but repeated incidents.
Some of which I vaguely recall before I was stationed here. At the Foundation, we receive countless reports from all across the nation, so it's difficult to pinpoint the serious and most dangerous ones.
Right, and we've recently received a report of, well, unfortunately, more missing people. These disappearances are unusually common in this town, according to many of the locals I've talked with. Rumors of witchcraft in the mountains, tales of nightly folklore creatures, and dark rituals performed in the woods are all consistent with their stories.
The veil is tearing. I'm not sure how to stop it until it's too late.
It's terrifying to really think what might come through the veil. After all, the pale man from the teenager's story wasn't caught, even after the ritual was performed and that smoky figure didn't vanish.
Another unseen wraith, yet this one was beginning to take form. Once these wraiths take a full form and become what the Foundation calls a shadow form, they may move around the house freely from where they were conjured. I fear that pale man's successful ritual, that the veil was left open for others to cross through.
Which brings me to a question, sir, if you don't mind, before we begin the majority of the recent report. Why must we do these entries at night? If all these entities prefer the night to present themselves, why aren't we out there now?
I suppose because spirits will find us rather than our tireless mortal efforts. Sometimes merely talking about spectral entities is enough to draw them forth. Under certain moon phases, we hear them more clearly, as you may have noticed. However, with bodies disappearing, it means that living things are at work here. Stumbling upon them could spell certain danger and possible death.
Speaking of disappearances, I was able to track down some really old information, almost back to the founding years of Potter's Hill. From those old notes, there came some tales regarding a vile creature, I suppose. I'm not sure what class to really place it in. And if it's alright, sir, I'd like to tell those stories now. Perhaps it can shed some light on our investigations, and from these notes it seems like a lot of these people have gone missing too, even in the past.
Very well. After these old stories, we'll update the recordings with the recent disappearances. Maybe there are some connections.
I think there is, yes. These stories, 3 in total, follow one James Mallory, who apparently was some kind of paranormal investigator, even back in the days of early Potter's Hill, way back in the 1600s. These are his journals. Nightmares are a common occurrence, that much is true. At least most of the people I've met claim to have a few night terrors throughout their life, young or old. But what happens when a nightmare morphs into reality? And that is where I, James Mallory, tend to step in. The studying of the mystery of shadows intrigues me, and it seems to me that these people among such a young country have a rising rate of living terrors. It seems absurd, but there have been 5 disappearances since I have arrived here in Potter's Hill. The cemetery is a new project to continually maintain if they wish to remember those who are deceased. What lingers here in the shadows is my first and primary focus as I live rather uncomfortably in a place of strangers. These few recordings, done with ink, quill, and paper, will be my sessions with these terrified civilians, in hope that I shall discover the truth of this ever-darkening shadow. The first session I sat down with one Abigail Williams, claiming she has witnessed a night demon on multiple occasions. I've written the story from an outside perspective, and perhaps with a bit of embellishment to make the mood enlightening. Session 1, year 1612, 14th of August. Victim, Abigail Williams. It began on a Tuesday, a cold and windy day with gray clouds spitting upon the sullen dirt. The forest was whispering around the quaint town of Potter's Hill, littering, dying, and crumpled leaves upon the cobblestone roads. A storm was upon them, no doubt, and the civilians rushed to put away their livestock and push their children indoors. Gray clouds for 3 days was an ill omen, or so the pastor would claim, and if they did not receive the sun soon, there were rumors of possible scouting to a new boundary. The light needed to be upon them, or else food would become scarce. The people of the church had begun to worry that the precious land was under a continual and evil curse. Abigail had no quarrel with the pastor, nor to his fathers who had thought of this living curse lingered around their village. But even so, they would often murmur amongst each other in fear of this unknown terror. Abigail would listen intently to these conversations as the spread of the ill omen was across the town in a matter of a day's passing. As the wind picked up rather ferociously one day, howling and beating against the wooden frames of the houses, causing the windowsills to slap against the walls, Abigail squinted into the frenzied branches of the forest. If she guessed correctly, this night would be the second that it would come. A creature, unlike any human, yet sounded exactly like one. But as she gazed upon the tall stalks of the decaying cornfields leading into the thick forest of pine trees, their bark nearly ripping off, she could not stay any longer. She feared the two piercing eyes would meet hers, and that she would be caught under an evil spell. Yet as she turned her back, the sensation of those glaring eyes pounded into her mind and caused her to double over. Dizziness was set upon her, and she stumbled her way inside her home, not bothering to latch the door. Tripping into bed, Abigail passed out of consciousness for the better part of the storm. Rain poured down onto Potter's Hill, flooding the streets and destroying what was left of the scattered crops. But when an hour had passed, the deluge stopped instantly, and Abigail had woken up. She desired to get up, but she was suddenly bound to the bed, her wrists and ankles pinned down by an invisible force. Glancing around, she could not find any hands forcing her down, only herself struggling with this unforeseen enemy. Abigail forced her neck so that she could shift her focus to the bedroom door in front of her, and flinched in terror when it slammed shut on its own. Or so she thought. At first she guessed it to be a strong draft from the storm outside, but when she listened, nature had turned quiet. Almost too quiet. Again, Abigail flinched when she suddenly saw movement in front of her, for when the door had closed, a pale hand with black talons scraped against it, scratching the wood with a terrible rub, and heard scuttling near the foot of the bed directly after. The breathing of this peculiar creature began as a whisper, choked and forced. It rose to a gurgled attempt of possible words, and as Abigail's own breathing quickened, whatever was at the foot of the bed matched it. The steady rhythm of her panic attempts of a yell were muffled, and her head shot upward. The only thing she could move was her eyes, tracing her focus from the door to the bed to the table on her side. On it was a single candle that had been the only source of light. What she saw in the room with her now was two silver glaring eyes, surrounded by a pale face, and a darkness, blacker than the night sky clouded the rest of its body. With crooked teeth it smiled, and it breathed in steady, gargled chokes. Abigail shut her eyes tightly and tried to clench her fists, but they remained open and vulnerable, the same to the rest of her body. With a cold and clammy touch, she felt the creature run its hands and sharpened talons upon her leg, and then up to her arm, up to where she could sense it being inches away from her face. A slimy substance ran across her cheek from the creature, its tongue marking its next victim. Abigail still did not wish to see her oppressor, and as it jumped off her in an instant, the sensation of being pushed into the bed lessened, her breathing stopped, and all was calm again. Conclusion of Session 1. From what I've gathered in my books of lore, history, and strange mythology and folklore of the world, I have pinpointed this creature down to two suspects, both of which I know not how to lure to myself. The first being what's known as a skin changer, a shapeshifter that walks among the earth pretending to be blood of another being, only to capture and slay the poor prey. The other guess may be far-fetched, but there is one such nightmarish creature named the Alptron, or in rough translation, a nightmare. I must do some more researching before my next session so I know what I'm up against. But what I can gather from this session is that this creature enjoys the fear and suffering of average and ordinary citizens. It doesn't necessarily pick the individuals who are in power, but rather the people who are, unfortunately, easily forgotten. It may be a sad truth to reveal, but if it's another step and note into my investigation, I must remember every small detail at all costs. The next session of this mystery will be at random, and I hope that the next death will not be because of this strange and dangerous creature. Session 2, Year 1612, 17th of September, Victim Jacob Hoffman. From the sudden death of Abigail, there was great unrest in Potter's Hill. The hunting grounds for the men were retracted significantly. The women would rarely go near the wooden fence borders, patiently waiting for their husbands, brothers, and sons to return, and the children would only play outside when the sun shone, and there were only wisps of clouds floating daintily above. The fear of shade itself grew intensely. Jacob Hoffman did not believe in an old wives' tale, though, and the rumors of a so-called nightmarish beast prowling the town was completely absurd to him. He was a man of knowledge and faith, and with both being at his side, he would recognize no such defeat on himself. He pushed the council to extend the hunting borders again, or else Potter's Hill would go into starvation into the next year. As another work-filled day came to a close, Jacob hunkered near to his favorite spot in the family house, a comfortable, warm fireplace where he could hear his sister's low voice tell her children tall tales of old, where those imaginary creatures of the town's rumors came alive in their minds. Jacob took a quick swig of hard liquor from his canteen to wash away the long and strenuous day, and sighed deeply as his sister finished her story to the delight of the children. He scoffed at the fantasy of actually placing belief in such a thing before his sister had waved the kids into the room for a deep slumber. Jacob turned in for the night, his limbs and back sore from a long day of tracking, hunting, and hauling. He placed his heavy boots in the corner of his room, shed his long-sleeved shirt off, and stretched as he paced in a weary and exhausted mood. As he glanced out the window, he could see that his neighbor had forgotten to draw their curtains, leaving their bed and their head peeking out of the blankets, exposed to the full moon's blue light. He shook his head, but just as he was about to turn away, he saw movement to the further side of the bed. The blankets ruffled and shifted on their own, as if tiny mice were underneath. But it was not rodents at all, which made the blankets suddenly rise, nearly to the size of a child, and had rounded top to it. The neighbor did not move a single time during this whole moment, confusing Jacob to the point where he called out loudly to his sister, who barged in and scolded him for awakening the kids. But when she saw his terrified expression, she rushed to the window. From above, the sight was truly horrifying. A pale, deformed creature crouched on the stomach of the neighbor, its bare feet resembling a skeletal surface digging into the once healthy skin of the poor victim. With black talons, it drove its fingers straight into the flesh of the neighbor's neck, where they screamed in what seemed like absolute silence, leaving their mouth gaping open in complete terror. Jacob winced and clutched the edges of his holy book, reciting brief prayers under his breath of protection and blessings. Both he and his sister saw from its face that it was no ordinary figure, but rather a demon set from evil itself. Its eyes were a dull silver, sunken into black sockets, while its gray face was blanketed mostly by thin, entangling strands of black, wet hair. Its nose was nearly non-existent, and from its mouth protruded thin, jagged teeth, first smiling greedily at its victim, and then to open it at an unnatural and wide angle. From the neighbor's body wafted a blue mist, swaying in the air like a current in the river, but morphing into a black cloud as it flowed into the creature's mouth. Jacob and his sister stared at the awestruck horror for another minute until suddenly the creature stopped, snapped its jaw shut, and gazed straight up to the pair with its menacing, unblinking eyes. Jacob gasped, closing the curtain swiftly and uttering another short prayer. His sister looked at him with a despairing gloom. It was too late for them. Indeed, from that very night, Jacob was suddenly struck with an illness in which no doctor had seen or experienced before. Bedridden, he feared the day that the night terror would come for him. He wouldn't need much time to see his sister again, for she too fell sick in a matter of days after him. With fear plaguing their minds at day and tormenting them at night, they would finally feel a release at the end of the 7th day. Their funeral was on the 8th. Conclusion of Session 2. My research has brought me to the conclusion that this is indeed the creature of the Albtraum, and after this session, it became clear to me that not only is this Albtraum alive and present, but it appears to place curses on eavesdroppers. I do wonder on most recent nights if this thing has physically been transported to the new land, or if this figment of folklore appears from the minds of those who believe it. Both sides are terrifying to accept as the truth. Despite it being in the presence of many of its victims, it is not much of a public figure, so to speak. I have learned that this creature does not induce horror toward its victims as a result of stealing their essence, but it worries me that placing curses and hexes upon people is little to no stress to it. Perhaps the light of the full moon had given it an ultimate power of sorts, its peaking phase of sinister skills. I haven't much time before the entirety of Potter's Hill is vacant, emptied of their very souls. This next entry is a little different from the others, as it includes some dialogue. Most of our entries don't really rely on dialogue, as most words sometimes can't be remembered exactly how they were spoken at the given time, but the conclusion on this is, well, disturbing.
Even so, we must finish this entry. We have a long night ahead of us. Dark presences may already be here, listening to this very story.
I'll do my best, sir. Session 3, year 1613, 29th of January. Victim, Timothy Ralston. The dreams of a child are endless, where the imagination is higher than the sky. So much creativity in one mind, even in a dull place such as Potter's Hill, where the graveyard has a bigger population than the town itself. If not for the decaying crops, the bitter cold of winter wiped out most of the town. It was a promising idea, the dream of Potter's Hill, but apparently they were not prepared for what lies beyond reality. The comprehension of other realms was not in the mind of Timothy during his last night in Potter's Hill, and it was quite depressing to know that his brilliant mind would not reach to the clouds one day. There he was, huddled around his diminishing family of 4, once 7. The dying embers of a fire was the only source of warmth in this night. Timothy's father blew at it to keep it alive while his mother swallowed both Timothy and his sister in thick blankets. Their teeth chattered and they sniffed their noses in discomfort. Red rashes appeared in every spot they itched, day after day, and their stomachs groaned in pain. "Tell us a story," said Timothy to his mother, "to help us pass the time." "No stories today," his mother responded, rubbing her hands together. "We must spare our breath while we still can." "But couldn't we have fun before the winter breaks us?" asked Timothy's sister. "It will not break us," retorted the father. "We will survive another season, just as we have done before. You must get some sleep before the fire goes." "Perhaps I can dream us out of here," mumbled Timothy. "What about the Dream Man?" Timothy's sister asked. "That's a good story, too." Timothy's mother smiled as she wrapped them both in a thin blanket and agreed to tell it quickly before the moon was to be at its highest. The story began with 2 kids, just like Timothy and his sister, who had almost nothing to play with or other children to be friends with. It was a lonely town in the forest, and there was no way of getting out. But one day, a tall man with a flowing black coat, fancy pants, and a tall black hat came striding into town on a large and exquisite horse. Inside the backpack, the man told the children he had magical items, and they were indeed beautiful and thrilling to behold. The man gave them trinkets and toys to play with on the first day, and their delight lifted to the skies. But soon the toys vanished that night. On the second day, the man gave them smaller toys, but made of wood and did not move or sparkle. The kids were disappointed, but the man promised them if they joined him in the enchanted forest, he would give them delight every day, full of magical toys and snacks on the hour. On the third day, no one in the town ever saw those 2 children again, nor did they see the dreaded Dream Man. "So what can we learn from this?" Timothy's mother asked quietly. "Not to trust strangers," rang in Timothy and his sister, their eyes closing gently. No other words were shared as the children were rushed into the rooms, and the door was shut as the blankets of the bed wrapped neatly around them. Timothy was thinking of all the toys he would get if the Dream Man came. There were so many that came to mind that he tossed and turned in bed. He couldn't decide on just one of them. Gusts of violent winds shifted the banks of snow that could be heard outside, and the groaning of stiff branches of the forest that grew closer into the town each passing year. Timothy shivered as more of the howling passed by their house, invading their privacy and giving tremors to their hopes. A story would be told that night, and of a way out, but not in the manner that little Timmy had wished. As he dozed off in an uneasy sleep, he dreamt of his house, much grander than now, with a roaring fire, presents marked for him and his sister around a decorated and full tree and a full plate of food for each of his brothers and sisters. All 7 were there, when they had all been a full family, and he was the happiest that he could ever be. He danced and sang and played with the little trinkets his father had carved for them. It was as if Christmas had come twice that winter. Once he was finally worn out, he crawled into bed, but not before he would make a new friend, the man in the closet. He was a funny man with a silly voice. He could not really talk, only growl and cough. But what he did have that was so funny to Timothy was his skinny head and long nose. His smile stretched from ear to ear, and he had many sets of teeth. His hair was wet, and it covered its glowing silver eyes. Timothy stood up from his bed and asked it to play, of which it answered clear as day.
Come here. We play in here.
The man stretched out a thin, pale arm with the outstretched taloned hand. Timothy giggled and inched his way forward. He neared the blackening closet, growing bigger and bigger, until the last thing he saw was the countless freckled teeth, smiling and opening. The next morning, Timothy was gone, and no traces were seen of him. Strange tracks from outside led to the window, and another tombstone was added to the cemetery. Funerals were a common event, no matter what the age, and the shadow of fear had taken over. Conclusion of Session 3. The story seems interesting, as it comes from a child, and a wild story at that. The elf drum gives nightmares, yes, but it also gives an unmistakable lure of curiosity. The discovery of new things, whether it be nightmares or friends, is what makes people so vulnerable and gullible. I suppose that's also why the elf drum is so dedicated on the lesser people of society, because they have dreams that seem so unattainable. Why then should they bother even dreaming of impossible things I will never understand or live through? But with this last session, it seems like the elf drum will continue to strike at random, leaving hardly any trace, and if it is followed, it only leads to more disappearances and deaths. So you might be asking this: how do I know the emotions? How do I know the details? It's not that I'm writing this as an embellished tale, like I said earlier, because I was there for it all. I am writing this to relive these savory moments that make themselves home in my mind. Yes, I am shifty and unliked among the society, but I am still here until the town will perish. Whether by decay or torment of the nightmares, I shall continue to return. I am the darkness that lurks in the corner. I am the one who was born in the night. I am the devourer of hope, and I am the death-bringer. I am the mystery of the shadows.
After hearing this, as well as the final conclusion, it leaves me with an unsettling result. That this creature, which is extremely intelligent and very clever, was never found dead. Nothing was written about it, and though it has been hundreds of years, some creatures of folklore tend to live very long and violent lives.
You're saying it might still be out there then? And, well, I don't think I really need to ask this, but did you hear that? All these ethereal whispers are...
Leave. Do not come back. We are watching.
After our last entry was interrupted by unseen spirits, perhaps we should get right into the entry so we do not lose track of time, and so we do not lose any more footage.
Right. Yes, that makes sense. Those whispers, well, more than whispers now, were really ominous. I suppose we should note that we are recording this entry the same night as when we were interrupted by the voices. We actually ended up moving our equipment to a different place and just hoping for the best.
Yet it won't be long until they find us here.
Wait. You mean they'll follow us here? To my own...
Don't name the location. It'll be easier for them to track us down. Now, like I said, we should move right along into the stories.
I heard them. This isn't good. I think we should just move somewhere.
Be brave, Emmett. We are part of the Mystical Obscura Foundation. If you are too frightened by voices, then maybe you aren't fit to be part of the Mystic Archives.
Are you okay, sir? I thought I heard... Well, it sounds weird, but your voice sounded, well, off, in a way.
I'm fine. For the last time now, get on with the entry before the night ends.
I'm sorry. Well, from our last entry, we stated that there have been many disappearances around the town of Potter's Hill, and with a combination of old records, it seems to be a similar pattern. Additionally, a recurring symbol, the double triangles, one being right side up while the other being upside down with the line through the middle, also seems to be a similar cult icon. I suppose I'll get to it by the end. Well, from the last entry, beginning in the 1600s, there have been a multitude of odd happenings. Vanishings, killings, cult rituals, and even possession. But the strange fact is that separate towns all across the country had sudden spikes of these rare occurrences. It's like each year an evil spirit chooses a different location to take up residency. This year, unfortunately, it is in Potter's Hill. Halfway through the year, there have been a total of 14 disappearances. No traces, no tracks, nothing to follow. Other attempted capturings have taken place, as well as potential rituals like the one we had retold earlier. I spent some time with the teenager in that entry, and he is, well, still shaken up about it. However, I was not allowed into the home because of the parents. They seemed defensive about it, despite my saying that I was there to help what was in the attic. They had a strange tone to their voice as well. It was almost guttural, like their words were being forced out, and they always frowned at me, angered at my presence. When they closed the door on me, I immediately noticed something. Hanging on the door was an upside-down triangle made of twigs and bramble. I tried not to look at it for too long before I headed out. I can't let this odd cult get to my head so easily. After my time trying to get a look at the attic symbols, I went searching for others who had connections to the recent disappearances. At one of the diners in town, I got into contact with someone named Naomi. It was very recent what happened to her family, just a few days after the ritual in the attic. But the way Naomi describes the actions and feelings of her and her sibling seems to be a widespread thing across Potter's Hill. It began at the beginning of the year, according to her. An odd sensation that something was watching them and trying to reach out to them. Nearly every night, and always between 2 and 3 a.m., both Naomi and her sister Hannah were drawn to suddenly wake up and walk over to their windows. Their house was close to a nearby forest, where they could barely see through it in the night, but also where the mountain ranges could be easily seen. When the family had moved in, they fell in love with the scenery, being closer to nature, seeing the beauty of it all. But during the night was when those serene feelings morphed into those of fear. The lure of the mountains. Hannah whispered it to herself almost too often. Naomi heard her mumble, "The mountains, fire in the mountains," several times throughout the day, though she wouldn't be talking to anyone. Naomi's parents began to worry about her when she refused to eat. It got so bad that they could only force down soup just to make sure she had something in her system. Their mother took some days off of work to take Hannah to the doctor, but the strange behavior took a twist when suddenly Hannah acted like herself when they got to the doctor's office. Her skin returned to normal rather than the extremely paleness she had before. Once they returned home with nothing wrong, it only took a matter of days before the same cycle repeated itself. This time, though, Naomi stayed awake during the night instead of being woken up by some invisible spell. Eventually it worked, where Naomi decided to sneak into Hannah's room and wonder what she did when that odd sensation called her to the window. One night, as Naomi snuck into her sister's room, she could remember something that will forever be embedded into her memory. Creaking open the door, Naomi saw Hannah standing at the foot of the bed, completely still and breathing heavy. Cold puffs from her breath could be seen in the dark room, while the moonlight streamed inside. Hannah's pale skin had returned, and she had gotten much thinner, dangerously to the point of being hospitalized. Naomi almost reached out before Hannah shuffled over to the open window and stared outside for the longest time, her breath fogging up the glass. Ever so slightly, she bumped her head against the window. Thump, thump. over and over again until she suddenly stood rigid. Naomi covered her mouth as she gasped in shock. The window was moving on its own. It was opening now, letting the cold wind come through. Then, if Naomi wasn't terrified enough, Hannah's head turned almost all the way around and stared at her sister with pale gray eyes, smiling at her with an unnaturally wide grin. "The mountain will claim you next," she said in a gargled and choked voice. Before Naomi could stand up and call out to her sister, Hannah had already climbed out of the window and jumped outside. Naomi's screaming woke up her parents, who rushed inside and saw the open window. Immediately they gathered what they could to go out and find where Hannah might go. The answer was obvious. The woods. The mountains. Naomi heard her parents' desperate cries outside, their heavy footsteps entering the forest, and then nothing. Silence. Naomi didn't dare to go outside into the woods at night. She knew it was cursed. She knew her sister was gone. She had heard the whispers, trying to persuade her to go closer to the mountain. She had seen the distant flicker of fire far into the distance on the cliffs, and she swore that she saw figures in front of those flames, beckoning her and Hannah to come over. Lastly, and very unfortunately, Naomi waited, but no answer would come to her. Hannah never returned, and neither did her parents. All three of them were reported as missing, and they have never been found. Once again, no tracks, no traces, and the one survivor of it all is left traumatized and full of fear and paranoia. Before she left in tears, she left me one last thing, that she still heard the call, and she still saw the figures upon the mountain in front of the same fire, urging her to go there. She doesn't know how much longer she can withstand it. Now, I did want to try and help her, move her into a small motel for the time being or something like that, but she just ran off in a panic, like she had said too much or someone or something was already following her. I ran after her, but I don't really know this town well enough to know its small alleys and shortcuts. I lost her and I haven't seen her since. I just hope that she didn't end up in the woods or in those mountains. Sir?
Yes, sorry, Apprentice Emmett. I've gotten less sleep than usual.
Oh, yeah, I suppose so too, sir. What do you make of all this? I haven't seen this fire in the mountain yet, despite constantly looking at the mountain. But it seems like every night these anomalies happen, that fire is a key element to whatever powers them.
Key element. Yes, the fire is a symbolic gesture to some cults. It may be that whoever starts these fires have strong abilities in witchcraft, able to protrude senses such as this luring effect. Some witches are able to morph into animals like cats or bats, nocturnal beasts that can watch innocent folk in plain sight. It is a possibility that this witch cult has both personalities.
I've heard in some cults that the fires are a significant way of burning away their past selves, a cremation of self, so to speak. Is it like that?
Very much so, and quite possible. Even more than just symbolic gestures. But we do have leads now, and we will be busy these next few weeks. Now,
Do we open it?
wait, it could be anything.
We've found you. Let us in.
It can't be. Black-eyed children?
Only one way to find out.
Wait, sir, are you sure we can...
You are home. It won't be long.
Their eyes.
Not now, Prince. I'm sorry, but you must leave. Your residency is elsewhere.
As is yours. Come with us. Return to the hill.
We will do no such thing. Depart from this place. You are not allowed.
We will come back soon. Be ready to depart.
That was terrifying. Their eyes, sir, they were They were all black. I thought they'd only exist in folklore and ghost stories. I didn't expect this at all.
In ghost stories, you say? Perhaps some paranormal tales are true. Tonight we've uncovered one.
I suppose so. What do they mean by returning to a hill? They seem to be directly talking to you. Maybe they didn't acknowledge me for some reason. It's just all too strange for me.
There are some things best kept hidden. They are after me because I delved too deep into the darker side of spiritualism. There is a hill where nothing grows, at the foot of the mountain. There is a relic there that must never be unearthed.
A relic? What sort of relic? Why didn't you tell me this before? I've been nothing but open and honest with you. I didn't think you'd keep secrets this vital to our research away from me.
What's said is said. Do not go to that hill. The buried relic
I know what you said. I'm just hurt that you've kept things from me. Each sound I hear is becoming clearer. The negative auras are increasing.
And the red moon draws closer. Its phase will cause many apparitions to come forth. We must be prepared.
Perhaps there's more things that can be found before that time comes. More information than I can know. From you.
The heart of the forest is not something for human comprehension, nor is it for them to hold. It is a dark, obscure piece of esoteric lore that I have yet to wrap my mind around.
So, then it's an actual item. A beating heart tucked inside the hills of the forest? No wonder Potter's Hill has so many supernatural incidents.
Yes, it seems this ancient trinket can be the source of our problems here.
Can be? If what you're telling me is true, then this is the best source of the paranormal we can latch onto. Part of our mission is to study the supernatural, too, and find the reasoning behind all the apparitions and odd creatures of folklore.
The fire in the mountains, the gray-stalking creature, and the lure of the hills are assumed to be connected with this heart. I've only seen it once, from afar, however, pulsing and beating steadily with an odd faint glow from inside. Even from looking at it from afar sent my mind into a frenzy, and I was almost caught by hidden guardians.
Then my guess of witchcraft is settled. There really are witches in the mountains.
Unfortunately, yes. This witchcraft cult is far more dangerous than I initially thought. Their symbol, the double triangles that you have seen, has a malevolent message. Reject the heavens to summon hell.
You don't mean to say they're trying to summon actual demons to possess us?
Possess or ensnare us for the ultimate sacrifice. The conjuration of an ancient devil. Which, coincidentally, leads us to our current entry, Apprentice Emmett.
Yes, right. It does, sir. We've received and intercepted messages of a strange appearance lately happening in Potter's Hill, all across town. This next entry was from an older gentleman named Ian, who graciously came to our station and reported his specific incident. I'm ready when you are, sir.
Yes, begin now, and no more stalling.
Right, yes. Apologies, sir. Like some of the other stories we've had, I'll be telling this in the perspective of the victim of this incident. My name's Ian, and I've lived in Potter's Hill for nearly 30 years now. Though the town is odd by nature, and believe me, it's been strange for a while, the recent disappearances and happenings among the streets and outer hills are anything but ordinary. I don't go out into the forest, at least not normally, but definitely not at night. Most people tend to ignore going out at night, even the younger ones, and for many good reasons too, one of which why I came to you two. Something needs to be done about these awful apparitions, anything that could rid our town of it. There were rumors here and there about a vanishing man. I thought it was absurd to think an actual person could turn invisible, but I hadn't thought of apparitions until I experienced it myself. I suppose the first actual appearance that I thought was odd was only what I could describe as a devil man. At first, I thought I had gone straight mad when I saw it, just for a brief second. Was it really the same vanishing man everyone had been talking about? Well, the first time I saw it, that creature was not in the form of a human. It was nearing sunset, so I thought I had seen an odd shadow at my neighbor's house. I saw it briefly from the corner of my eye as I was cleaning up at the end of the day. It made me go back for a second take, and I definitely regret it. This shadow entity was creeping in the bushes surrounding the neighbor's house. It was made of black mist and had its back turned towards my direction. A shadowed, taloned hand suddenly reached up to grasp the window. I was frozen to the spot as I watched a dark head follow behind it, a curved, horned silhouette set on both sides. In that moment, I named this entity the Devil Man. Those horns were cursed. It resonated a faint crimson glow before wisping away into the cooling air. As it peeked inside my neighbor's house, spying on them, or at least trying to find someone, it suddenly rose up in tremendous height, stretching its blackened, misty body nearly 20 feet high to peek into the second-floor windows. Its legs could briefly be seen now, and it made my body tremble. These legs were like those of goats. Black hair covered them and rustled with that same crimson mist. Instead of feet, hooves took their place. Surely this was some kind of devil spawn. I saw it tap on the window then with its taloned fingers. The crimson horns gave a short burst of red mist, like it released something. I'm not sure what it was, but watching this all unfold caused me to unknowingly creep closer to my own window. That was the last mistake I made. This dark entity snapped its direction suddenly towards my direction and stared directly into my eyes. That vile face would haunt my nightmares for weeks. I still remember it now, and I hope that it will disappear from my mind after telling the story. It wasn't quite a face, but rather a half-skull with pale skin loosely attached. A small red eye was embedded deep in the skeletal eye socket, while the other side was stitched up like a doll. The jaw hung loosely and extended to an irregular position, but the way that it slid in and out of the darkness was terrifying. Not only was its body made of darkness, but as it slunk back into the corners of the bushes, it was like its entire form had vanished. I backed up instinctively, and I'm glad I did. Right at the thin pane of glass, its face suddenly reappeared and grinned at me, tapping the glass rhythmically with its black-taloned fingers. The lights began to flicker in the room. Shadows danced across the walls. I panicked, and I tripped over myself. The lights were completely shut off now, and when I stood back up, the devilish face at the window was fading away into the darkening night. Well, as you can guess, I didn't sleep at all that night. I locked every door and window and never left my room, waiting for the sun to rise. The paranoia that this entity would invade my house interrupted my every decision. I dared not to go out, not even for food or water. By the time morning arrived, I was comfortable with going out. I decided to visit the local bookshop for spiritualism and the like. Some protection is better than none, you see. Paranoid and scared out of my mind, I barely said a word while I drove out and collected a few books on the paranormal and superstitious arts of the night. Most of what I got were lists of demons and their precarious nature. Some listed ways to attempt to ignore demons once they entered a household, but I needed a way to protect it from getting inside. Panicked, I hadn't realized that half the day was already gone by the time I skimmed through all the books. The sleepless night suddenly hit my body with drowsiness, and I eventually fell asleep on my armchair. That was an awful incident to experience on top of what I saw. In this dream, I wandered throughout my house in the night. No lights worked outside, and it was pitch black. I could barely see anything, and yet my body was being guided by some internal force. Each room I went to, I could see that wretched face, that half-skeletal pale devil, peek out of its head and horns for just a second before vanishing into the black darkness. Long whispers and raspy breaths were heard each time I saw the face. When I fell asleep, I thought I'd scared myself to death. Right behind my unconscious body, the form of that demon suddenly flashed its harsh fangs at me, and its black mist surrounded me all at once. The horns curled irregularly, and I felt my heart shoot with pain. I was suddenly shot back into my corporeal body, and I gasped for breath. All the lights were out, and it was night. Had I really been asleep for hours upon end? I panicked and grabbed the book at hand to run to the door and escape. None of the lights worked when I tried to switch them on, and when I reached the door, it wouldn't budge. The handle turned instantly hot and burned my hand. I winced in pain and raced to the kitchen. Sliding out one of the drawers, I found a book of matches and raced upstairs to my room. That horrible sensation of something following you up the stairs was real that night. The thumping of footsteps followed me each step of the way, but I dared not to look back. Sweat poured down my face as I slammed my room door shut. Instant pounding on the door followed. Finding a nearby candle on my desk, I lit it with trembling hands as I tore through the book to find anything of protection. Boom! Boom! The pounding of the door was so loud, and it sent absolute terror through my body. The raspy voice called out to me in an eerie tone, saying my name over and over again. I couldn't listen to it. I had to stop this curse. Boom! Boom! It was a wonder that the door hadn't been broken through. The banging was ceaseless. I was nearing the end of the book when the entity stopped saying my name and made this strange guttural sound. Growl! Growl! It was so strange and it caught me off guard. I froze for a moment, but slipped back into fear when the pounding continued. There in the faint candlelight, I saw that salt could hold back some spirits. It would have been useful if it was back in the kitchen. I panicked and stumbled to my bedside drawers and found a small crucifix. Grasping it with sweating hands, I returned to the pounding door and without hesitation swung it wide open. Silence. Nothing to be seen. No misty body, no floating skeletal head, but I wouldn't let it get the best of me. I raised the crucifix high in front of me and recited the prayers that I've known for so many years. Grumbles and raspy breaths came from every room as the door slammed shut. Blackness surrounded the hallways with a low growl resonating and shaking the walls. Heavy footsteps followed behind. No, not footsteps. Hoof steps. The clip-clop of heavy hooves slammed on the hardwood floors. As I raced down the steps, hearing that ominous voice. Growl! Growl! I nearly tripped on the last step and raced to the kitchen, desperately finding the remaining salt I had and sprinted towards the back door. While I found the door, I looked back and saw this tall silhouette of the devil man stretching high up to the very top of the ceiling. It had to bend down just to fit inside. Its taloned fingers stretching out towards me and its horns puffing out crimson mist. The red eye inside its skeletal face was shining with violent delight. Turning the handle, I darted out the back door and waited in the cool night. I watched each window carefully as the lights inside were flickering on and off in rapid succession. Rather than waiting for the entity to chase me, I decided to flee to my neighbor's house. I felt bad for it afterwards, but I wanted that thing out of my house so I could protect myself. That whole night I sensed that entity slinking around the neighbor's house. They weren't home that night. Perhaps they had gotten a nightmare of their own and fled somewhere far away. The doors were open and the windows weren't locked either. Either way, I shut myself in the nearest bathroom and poured lines of salt in the front of the door and made a circle around myself. Shaking, I waited another sleepless night until the sun rose. Even while the night passed, I could hear his raspy breath, sometimes calling my name, sometimes airing that strange sound. Growl! Growl! As the next day arrived, I sped back to my house and encased the entire home in a giant salt circle so that not just the doors were safe, but the entire structure. It sent relief to me when sunset arrived and I didn't sense the entity at all. But I did see it again. Far away down the street, that same devil man was creeping around the houses, stretching its black misty form and vanishing in seconds. Later that week, when I was finally comfortable to go out normally again, I returned to the bookstore and found more material on those odd dark forces. It mostly scared me that I was reading and I stopped looking into it out of fear of other spirits, listening or watching me. It may not be believable for some, but after what I've experienced, I will always place faith that spirits exist around us. A strange sort of ritual kept appearing in those local books as well, one that revolved around a fire, a burning of an effigy, and the place of stones beneath the mountain. With just a passing glance, I had no wish to delve further into it. Sounding like witchcraft, I closed the materials and sent them back to the store. All these dark spirits have me worried since my incident. Is it still among our community? Well, I fear it will continue to haunt us until something is done.
Again with the fire, and the burning of an effigy.
The cremation of self, from what I've read through some sources.
Yes, a dangerous ritual from their group can spell certain disaster to the specific people they target. However, some rituals they perform unsuccessfully can release spirits from the in-between, accidentally, and without their knowledge. I think it may be the best solution to finally go after this cult of the mountain before anyone else is affected by them. We will have to plan ahead before doing anything reckless.
If they perform a ritual, is there a way for us to perform some sort of cleansing? If this man was able to defend himself against this ominous spirit by the use of just one crucifix and simply a soul circle, we should be able to collect other spiritual items for our own battles.
Battles, you say? Yes, I suppose there will be a battle, one that will be divided from our physical limitations and our mental abilities. We will need more than just trinkets. I suppose we will be in deep meditation for this. Perhaps I may teach you about this.
We'll need to hurry before the rising of the red moon. Sir, are you okay? Did I say something?
Just a memory, Apprentice Emmett. A long past memory from when I was an apprentice myself for the Foundation. There was a time when we had to deal with perilous spirits on a red moon. It was a frightening time, and we were much less prepared than we are now. However, with these unknown figures, creatures, and entities in recent times, the danger can turn out to be far worse than I've seen.
Well, yes, the red moon definitely has some sort of odd effect on many things, from rituals to spirits. I think if we don't hurry, that heart of the mountain might be unburied for the wrong reasons.
But it's also something we must stay away from. It's far too perilous for human hands to touch. An esoteric trinket of the ancient past cannot be simply lifted and hidden. Just as this witch cult performs their dark rituals, we are able to perform our own light rituals in order to move the heart. It's a complicated incantation, but it's possible. But first, we must stop the cult.
I suppose you're right, sir. Things are ramping up rather quickly, but I suppose the realm of the paranormal can be just that, alarming and sudden.
And a realm which humans will never fully understand. Nevertheless, we will do our best to overcome the dark forces of the unseen.
Right, and now that we're back into the safety of the Foundation base here in Potter's Hill, with no disturbances, it should be safe to report our entries from now on, right, sir?
Setting protective incantations should have done the trick, yes. I suppose only time will tell. The mysteries of the ethereal disturb and interrupt many things which we call safe.
Very true, sir. This investigation has certainly proved that point. I should also tell this in the reporting before we get into the current entry. The reasons why we might sound panicked or not. Hopefully not, at least for the recordings.
Yes, the Foundation needs each key detail for investigations, especially those who are dealing firsthand with the perilous paranormal.
Exactly my point, sir. Well, since the last entry, both myself and my mentor decided to take a night visit close to the mountain range where the fires are seen on multiple occasions. We were careful and quiet, and though we didn't go to the circular field where the heart of the forest is, we crept up close enough to see the witch's entrance. It was, ominous to say the least. No one had approached it just yet, but in the slopes of the mountain there was a triangular entrance carved from stone and had runes etched deep into the frame. In front of this entrance there seemed to be some sort of stone altar. We couldn't get close to it because once we approached a little too close, voices shouted at us that they could see us and we'd be dead if they caught up to us.
Naturally, we sprinted out of the woods the best we could, though they chased after us for quite some time. It reminded me, at least, of that hiker who was lost in the woods and was being tracked by that odd gray creature.
Yeah, a good callback, sir. I hadn't really thought of that. But yeah, we made it out, despite them clearly following our tracks. We lay low for a while and not really returning to the Foundation base until a few days ago. Luckily, everything was still here and nothing was broken. But seeing that altar in front of the mountain entrance led us to believe that vile things are happening there.
The protection and defense of this cult can be extreme. However, I think we were able to see that what we did because of lack of security. We were fortunate to gather such crucial details. Of course, the triangular entrance ties directly to the cult symbol of the double triangle. That much is clear. But what they do with that altar is what troubles me.
Which does bring us to our current entry. It takes place at the very same spot that we were just visiting. This story, though, was written and recorded last year, so I'm not sure if the victims are still around or not.
Yet it is very vital to our predicament. What they do there spells horrendous disaster.
It really does, yes. I suppose then I should get to the entry. I'm still a little shaken up by that chase, and I'm definitely still paranoid that something or someone has been watching us. I'm worried that they might have found us already.
The paranoia will linger, as long as we continue this investigation. But for now, record the entry so we may leave the Foundation base for a few more days.
I hope that wasn't what I thought it was, but yes, you're right. Well, let's get into the entry before anything else happens. This incident revolves around a couple, Jacob and Sylvia. Their last names were not included as they didn't want others to know who they were specifically. Probably for a good reason, too. This couple was from out of town, but they knew about Potter's Hill because of the mountains and woods. Great hiking places and beautiful views to soak in the tranquility of nature. Most visitors come here for that reason to begin with. Jacob and Sylvia were planning on visiting for a weekend to hike the trails and possibly scale through some cliffs. They had been all around the country throughout their years together, trekking through thick forests, wading through deep rivers, and climbing high mountains. They were the thrill seekers who found adventure everywhere they went. But this adventure would prove to be one they'd never forget, and a place where they'd never return. While the couple was entering town, they stopped at a local cafe for a quick breakfast before hitting the trails. Their breakfast went by fine, but when they were about to leave, they overheard some locals talking about the more swampy areas of the forest, which piqued the couple's interest. If there was some difficult terrain nearby, it was important to learn about it. Jacob approached a few older men who were talking about it, catching the last few words of feral people and more disappearances. Jacob had to think twice about it. Feral people living so close to a neighborhood? Jacob had heard about feral people living deep in the woods, but certainly not from around here. The disappearances comment made his heart quicken, though. Kidnappings and capturings had been on the news more times than he could count, and it worried him immensely. It wasn't just specific people that were vanishing. It was just any type. A completely random choice. More than anything, he just didn't want Sylvia to be one of those unfortunate souls. When Jacob confronted the older men, he asked about the swamps nearby and told them that he and Sylvia were hikers, searching for new trails. The old men warned him not to go near the swamplands, repeating the dangers of the feral people. Apparently, a small community of homeless people had wandered from beyond the other side of the mountain and near to the town's borders. They never came inside the town, but most folks could see their small fires from inside the woods. Some curious teens dared to get close to them and saw that they lived in huts, gathered together like a commune of sort. But no one ever approached them. Something about them gave a dark aura, like they were protected by someone of strange powers or something out of the ordinary. Jacob listened to them, but didn't fully believe the old men's tales. He thanked them for the information and led Sylvia out of the cafe, telling her the report. Though she was a little skeptical too, she did know the dangers of feral people too, and knew they were capable of perilous deeds. Eventually, they did make their way to the edge of the forest, where a few other cars were parked. One was extremely old, rusting away and covered in moss, branches, and weeds. It was as if it hadn't been moved or touched in years. Is this the same car that one hiker drove? The one who saw the great creature? Jason, yeah. Jason Hansen?
Very likely, and not a pleasant update to hear. But go on now. Perhaps the rest of the entry will give us something more to think about.
Right. Apologies, sir. Once the couple had seen some activity of other people in the area, the conversation from earlier was out of their minds. They followed the main trails for the first hour, taking in the fresh air and admiring the absolute beauty of the nature around them, listening to the songs of birds and hearing the sounds of a rushing stream nearby. They wanted to get closer to the mountain to see more of the natural water sprouting from the cliffsides, and so they began to venture into smaller and lesser-known trails. Winding its way through an unfamiliar area, one trail led the couple over and under steep hills and jutting across steep inclines. But just when they thought this trail might have been abandoned, they noticed some movement up ahead. 3 figures, all of them wearing what looked like white robes, were walking in their direction, their backs straight and their movement stiff. It was as if they were robots, looking directly ahead with unblinking eyes. All 3 of them had shaved heads, though, one of them having a more feminine figure. A blue circular pattern was either painted or tattooed around their heads, each the same design, and as the 3 figures walked right past Jacob and Sylvia, the couple noticed odd writings that were on top of the blue tattoos. Neither of them knew what language it was as they glanced over their shoulder multiple times in case these odd people had devious purposes. But the figures never turned around or looked at the couple, just walked on by and disappeared into the woods. Both Jacob and Sylvia agreed that when they could see this trail going off to a different one, they'd choose the other one. But the only problem was that this trail continued on further, getting closer to the mountain, and where Jacob and Sylvia claimed that they lost track of time. It was past noon when they came upon another very strange sight, and one that made Jacob shiver in fright. The very same people that the older men had talked about were shuffling around their small community, made of huts and man-made caves. There was indeed a separate trail that led off to the right, but they would have to make a run for it. Otherwise, the only other option was to turn around and possibly confront the 3 figures from before. Sylvia looked back at the mention of them and gasped. There they were, all 3 figures walking much faster than before, and in their direction. Sylvia pushed Jacob to go further, but the loud footsteps and startled shouts caught the attention of the feral people. Dressed in tattered clothes, stained with dirt and mud, and having extremely wrinkled and worn skin, the feral people snarled and yelped like animals the moment they saw Jacob and Sylvia. Immediately, the couple darted forward and prayed for the best. It was a panicked and heart-pounding moment. From one direction, the 3 cult-like figures were gaining on them, while in the other direction, a pack of mindless forest people were chasing them down, throwing stones and sharpened sticks at them. Jacob was hit several times in the back as he let Sylvia run ahead of him. He felt the bruises form immediately. Fortunately, none of the sharpened sticks had hit him, but he did manage to grab one that flew straight over his head and got stuck in the wet mud in front. It was the least he could have for protection. They rushed past the small, dirty community and into the other path. Sweat pouring down and with labored breathing, the couple escaped the people narrowly and found themselves running until they were completely out of breath. They could still hear the people, but faint and far away. The trail continued on, further and closer to the mountain. Once they caught their breath and chugged down some much-needed water, they followed the path until it started to become dark. Sunset was nearing, and they had no shelter. But their terrible day was not done yet. Sylvia spotted movement ahead and alarmed Jacob. They saw not just the 3 figures from before, but an entire group of the same styled people walking silently through the woods. There could have been at least a dozen from what Jacob guessed. What they were all doing so deep in the forest, he couldn't guess, at least not yet. Just then, both he and Sylvia noticed something very out of place, an entrance into the mountain. a triangular frame that stood nearly 10 feet high as other people in white robes were standing completely still underneath it. Jacob and Sylvia crept closer once the first crew had gone by and watched the group. Once everyone was present, the entire group shed their white cloaks to reveal ominously black cloaks with red linings and red symbols on them. A double triangle, where one had its point down and the other up. A straight line went through both triangles vertically. Both Jacob and Sylvia grimaced at the thought that they were witnessing a cult ritual in the making. And they were. From inside the entrance of the mountain, 2 cultists were dragging a bound woman behind them, her body tied with thick rope and a blindfold on. She was struggling, trying to get out of her bonds any way possible, but the amount of people there were now was far too overwhelming for her. They dragged her onto a flat stone altar, which had strange symbols carved into it. The cultists began to chant in eerie tone while the leader held up a tome of a blackened book and boomed a vile incantation. During the chanting and at the end of the leader's spell, a mist that was blacker than the night itself snaked its way out of the mountain and lingered for a moment, as if in deep thought of which body was making the offering. The woman squirmed crazily, and desperate cries were attempted to fill the air, but she was gagged with a thick cloth. The black mist suddenly thinned and without hesitation pinned down the woman with a ferocious force, sending a strong wind across the cliffs and trees. Tall red candles from around the altar lit up at once, their flames extending higher than usual, surrounding the black mist until it took the form of a body. 2 legs like those of a goat, a torso that bubbled like a hot stew, and the head of a skeleton with 2 extensive horns rising from it. An absolute blasphemous and evil figure. But this figure would only appear for a few seconds before returning back to a thin wisp and entering into the woman's mouth, splitting apart the gag and into her body. There was a moment of silence then. No chanting, no incantations. Jacob and Sylvia were as still as statues. Just as the sun's final light was vanishing and the moon took its place, the body of the woman levitated above the altar, snapping off the rope and with her arms stretched out wide. She hovered there for a long time before she was dropped loosely on the stone slab and rolled to the ground. When she stood up, she was as stiff as those who were around her, and she was staring directly in Jacob and Sylvia's direction. That caused them to back up immediately, but not before they caught the glimpse of a sudden fire on the altar, a high flame that rose above the height of the entrance itself. The image of this sudden flame with the newly possessed woman made the couple tremble in absolute fear. They wouldn't say much after this moment. Adrenaline kicked in, and they ran as far and fast as they could. Jacob took out his old compass and followed it in the opposite direction of the mountain. Each step they took, they had new fears enter their mind. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. A witch cult hidden in the mountains? Possession by incantation? It was too dark of a topic for them both. They escaped the woods and ran back to their car, which was thankfully still there and untouched. It was morning by the time they reached their car, but that other car remained in place, the one decaying through time and wear. Another haunting image that would plague their minds for months to come. They never talked about it for weeks until they heard about the Mystica Obscura Foundation. Hesitant to return to Potter's Hill, it was clear that they were still in shock, remaining under a constant paranoia that the cultists would find them and bring them back to that same stone altar.
A very macabre tale, to say the least. But important to note that this cult was active a year ago when this happened and may still be reenacting these terrible rituals like this today.
It makes me wonder, though, that if this was happening a year ago and the Foundation received it then why hasn't anyone dispatched to this location? Or if the Foundation could have sent any kind of warnings to local police or investigators?
There might have been a few cases that were overlooked. It does happen from time to time, unfortunately.
What? As in some people's cases are just left open? Like a cold case? The Foundation needs to put focus on each and every entry. Isn't that the point in investigating the paranormal here? I know you heard that, sir. And if it is what I thought it said, then perhaps you'll tell me what's going on here. What's the Foundation really hiding?
If you no longer have faith in the Foundation, you are more than welcome to leave. There are some cases that were overlooked. I am not the leading member of the Foundation, so I don't know why some were left out.
But you've worked with them for years now. If I've noticed some things off with the Foundation and I'm new to all this, surely you've seen some things too. I can't let the negative energies disturb the entry. We can't lose any of these. After all we've been through, these tapes can't be lost. I need some air anyway, and probably the remainder of tonight to think things through. There's just too much in the unknown. Perhaps too many secrets as well. Okay, so once again, I'm in the cover of Hopeful Silence today. Since our last entry, I've felt something is off when it comes to this whole case. Mr. Steele doesn't want to talk about the Foundation hiding cases from us, or rather, from me. Alright, so I think Mr. Steele has just left the Foundation base. I was able to find a spare key for the place, and it's been a few days since I took it. Mr. Steele hasn't recognized this yet, so tonight I'll be looking for some important documents. Or what looks important, that is, which might be a big stack. There's usually a lot on his desk and in his room. He normally keeps the room locked, so I'm guessing he'll be back soon. I'll be taking pictures of the important documents, and I'll record what they say when I get back home. I can't let the voices get to me now. No one's here, and this is my chance. I was able to take a few pictures of documents I've never seen, and some of them are, well, they just don't make sense to me. So I'll begin with some that I've had some knowledge of before. There's a hidden figure called Balfamor, a forgotten demonic exiled prince of hell. This entity doesn't personally possess people, but rather he commands wandering evil spirits to gain some of his power, and for those smaller demonics to possess people. By doing this, whatever power this Balfamor figure has only increases with each possession, like they're tied to him whenever a successful possession takes place. Mr. Steele has a list of multiple victims who have been recently kidnapped and most likely part of that strange cult we talked about last entry. There was a large group in that entry, so it makes me wonder if they've grown in number by now. I really hope nothing followed me. Anyway, this demonic figure seems to be the key to all these disappearances, and definitely the figure to whom this cult worships and gives dark sacrifices to. Instead of killing someone, they place them on the altar, knowing Balfamor's spirit, which is hidden inside the mountain, to enter into the lesser demons and lastly into the victim. It explains why there's so many sightings of fire by the mountain. Each victim. Moving on to another element that was odd in this item called the Heart of the Forest, which Mr. Steele knows about, but warns me not to get close to it. I've never really heard of the Heart of the Forest, but I've read that certain skinwalkers place their own hearts in a secluded and hidden part of nature so that they can't spiritually die. It's a strange thing, but the spirit of a skinwalker is tied directly to its heart. Somehow it can actually literally rip the heart out and live this way. But we're dealing with dangerous paranormal entities, so not much really makes sense. I'm only hoping that Mr. Steele is trying to make me stay away from the heart of the forest for this reason. But why call it that? And why not just tell me directly? There's just too many unknown variables here. Lastly, and most disturbingly for me, is, well, a certain news article that was dated nearly 15 years ago. Among all the vanishings and strange disappearances, this article lists off the names, one of which includes Joseph Steele, 55 years old, short hair and a long scraggly beard, wearing circular glasses and dressed in a buttoned shirt and vest. Well, this is exactly how Mr. Steele dresses regularly, so perhaps he just wants to keep up his personal traditions. But is this really Joseph Steele that I'm working with? If he disappeared 15 years ago, it means a few things, some of which I can only guess at. But two of them come to mind for me repeatedly. The first, that he faked his own disappearance and possible death and is staying low still to this day. Or the second, and most perilous, that Joseph Steele that is recording with me now is not the true Joseph Steele, but a fake, a shapeshifter. But I suppose only time will tell which one of these is the true reason. As for the other cold cases of the Foundation, I can't access them since they're at the actual Foundation. Things are, well, they're turning dark, and I fear the night the red moon will shine upon us. Update over.
Whatever happens tonight, we should make it brief. There have been sightings of strange people approaching random doors with strong force and demanding that certain words and stories must be silenced.
I've heard about them too. If Potter's Hill isn't terrified enough already, all this commotion will stir up hidden rumors. Who are they? Do you know anything about them?
I may have some guesses, the main one being that they are part of an underground investigation led by hidden authorities, whether it's national or local. If secrets are spilling out in the town and are becoming widespread, it is their job to silence those who are talking.
Then we need to be extra careful to what we say. Just recording our entries seems to be enough to get them here, I suppose. Do they even have a name, this group?
Yes. The Crimson Breath. It is what the Foundation had named them many years ago. Wherever there were unseen breaths, as in paranormal whispers or disembodied voices, there seemed to be traces of what is called a crimson thread. Tiny specks like mist would gather in specific spots, but only for a limited time. The Crimson Breath would locate these people with strange abilities unknown to the Foundation and silence those who had the incidents.
Then they're the Foundation's rival? Perhaps that's not the right word for it, but...
A dark rival, yes. Their purpose is to silence. Our purpose is to help. We try to get to those victims before they do.
I had no idea there were physical threats. It's just really terrible to know.
Now that the red moon is close at hand, these entries may hold invisible messages that we occasionally hear, and if we do, it will be crucial to stop and listen. There may be certain key messages to stop the witch cults and their rituals in a non-physical way.
Let's hope for that, sir. I'll be more careful than usual. It's good that we mentioned this Crimson Breath, because it may be the very same group that our entry for this time is talking about. They seem to be similar, at least. Or, at least a similar vibe to what I know now.
Begin the entry then, Apprentice Emmett. I will keep watch on the windows. We don't want any shadows, real or ethereal, to come close.
Of course, sir. Unsettling, but I'll do my best in this moment. This next entry comes from the local cemetery groundskeeper, known just as Michael. This is one of the more recent stories, as it does revolve around this mysterious group that goes around, I guess, trying to stop people from speaking out. Whether they're tied to this witch cult of the mountain or not, we're not really sure, but it's highly possible. The cemetery groundskeeper, Michael, has lived in Potter's Hill for nearly 30 years now, and has been the groundskeeper for 13 of those years. He states that the cemetery fills up in certain years more than usual, while others are very quiet. He knows that Potter's Hill has some sort of curse set on it, one that waxes and wanes. But this year, he thinks, is the worst year that he's seen. Not only has he seen the same fires as the previous entry victims have, but he has seen and witnessed similar events in the past. Just a few days ago, he knew he had to keep his mouth shut during a few particular incidents. The first began on a regular day, after Michael was about to be done for the workday. He waited a while longer as the weather was really pleasant, and he enjoyed sitting at peace on his own, despite being surrounded by headstones. He was reading a book on a bench when he noticed a black car pull up on the farthest end of the cemetery, behind the black iron fences. Glancing up, he shrugged it off as potential mourners that were arriving late in the day. But something about them made him look up again. They were dressed all in black, which was regular. There was a woman who wore a long black dress and had a wide-brimmed hat with a black veil covering her head. The man wore a simple suit and tie, though no white shirts or pieces of clothes were seen underneath, or any bright colors. They both were just black. He wore black sunglasses and had his hair slicked back. Michael studied them from afar as they stood completely still for the longest time, gazing over the cemetery and never saying a word. They went right up to the fence with a stiff walk, and remained still and silent. Michael wanted to get up and ask them for the reasons of why they were there, but he felt something off about them. Not that he was scared of them, but the fact that they were behaving suspicious. Just as he was about to approach them, they turned and stiffly walked back to their car, a black SUV with tinted windows. Michael wasn't able to see inside or study the license plate as they peeled away in a hurry. Ever since then, he decided to stay late in case strange people like that ever returned. Unfortunately for him, they did return a week later, and most likely for devious purposes. On a regular day for Michael, after he did his rounds to make sure paths were clear, he waited and let the calm weather give him a sense of momentary peace. It was interrupted again by those same people, and again by the two people dressed in black. Only this time, to Michael's surprise, they walked up to the fence and went straight through them, like they were made of mist. He was so baffled at this he could barely force out a startled yell. And even when he did, the pair of odd visitors made no reply or hardly any recognition that he was there. They walked through the far past of the cemetery in silence until they stopped suddenly and quietly at one in particular. From afar, Michael wasn't sure which one, but it was in the area where the oldest headstones had been placed, almost back to the founding of Potter's Hill, and where the names were completely scratched off from weather or old age. The woman stooped down and began to dig into the soil itself with her bare hands, while the man slowly turned and gazed directly at Michael, as if he were suddenly in defense. Michael shouted at them that this wasn't permitted, and he would have to remove them from the cemetery and permanently ban them. With fear, Michael finally began to approach them with clenched fists, not wanting to use force, but he had dealt with stubborn visitors before. Yet these people were different. An invisible darkness was set around them that made him feel uneasy. As he was walking closer to them, Michael noticed the woman scoop a pile of loose dirt into a clear vial that she had pulled from her purse. Placing the dirt into the vial, she smelled it, paused for a moment, then stood back up and gave a quiet mumble to the man. Almost immediately, the pair walked swiftly back in the direction of the fence, while Michael yelled at them to leave the place, and they weren't welcomed here again. He watched them morph through the fence just as they did before, and get back into the car with no sound and stiff movements. This time, though, Michael wouldn't let them get away so easily, or at least he thought. He began to approach the front of the car before letting them drive away, But a second car, eerily the same design as the first, suddenly sped up and slammed on their brakes right in front of him. 4 men came out of the vehicle, each of them dressed all in black, from their suits to their shoes. They all had shaved heads, and strangely, they all had a tiny tattoo, a small triangle above their left ear. One of these men approached Michael, and before he could speak anything to the men, Michael stared into the eyes of the first man, whose eyes shimmered with a bright silver light. He was left frozen to the spot while the man spoke to him in a multi-layered voice, that he was to speak nothing of what he saw that day, and if he did, his entire family would be in danger. They listed off his address and named his relatives, even including some of their pets. Michael was trembling and terrified. Suddenly, the strange gaze was over, and he was able to move again. Only now he was standing alone in the cemetery at midnight. No one was around. Nothing was heard but the wind. He remembered what he saw and what he heard, and he is extremely brave to come to the Foundation and tell us his horrifying experience. This was 2 days ago, and I, Emmett, decided to visit him just yesterday. He is still there, but he's terrified and won't leave his house just yet, even though he's been working out in the cemetery for so many years. He believes this year is the worst one of Potter's Hill, and that this evil curse that wafts through the wind will not stop until the source is found and snuffed out.
It was kind of you to visit him, but...
But what? Should we help these victims after these terrifying incidents?
With the Crimson Breath already warning him, and with our reputation in the paranormal field, it may have done more harm than good.
I was just checking in on him. After hearing about this, I thought he'd want some company instead of sitting home all alone.
I understand, but with our auras drifting more into the ethereal realm, the more our essence poses a threat, both on us and onto others.
Still, I'd rather just try to help others than wonder if they would be the next victim for that cult of Balfamore.
Don't say that name, not out loud.
Well, why not? It's just a name, and it's not like I'm saying it during some kind of ritual.
That demon doesn't work like others. An exiled demonic force that has existed for hundreds of years could have learned to bend the rules. With no master, he has become the most elusive demon that the Foundation has faced.
But after learning how many people have disappeared because of this cult, we shouldn't be afraid to go after it. To go after Balfamore.
Stop, Emmett. You'll be putting yourselves in danger this very instant.
We've gained more knowledge because of this investigation. More information that we have to fight against the enemy. Unlike the victims that were dragged to that altar. It's time for us to stop being so afraid. And I think it's time for us to stand up against this threat of Balfamore and the rising of the Red Moon. We renounce you, demon. You have no sway on us. Begone, vile spirit, and return to the pits of hell. You have no hold on us. Be banished now. You must never return here. By our will and protection of the light, begone.
We must say this incantation in a dead language. Let me assist you.
The dark is above.
Begone, vile spirit, and return to the pits of hell. You have no hold on us. Be banished now. You must never return here. By our will and protection of the light, begone. Begone, vile spirit, and return to the pits of hell. You have no hold on us. Be banished now. You must never return here. By our will and protection of the light, begone.
And that is the reason why we do not call his name.
Yes, but now we know his lesser demons can be banished, even if it means danger in front of us. Vital information, sir.
You are delving into things far too perilous for the human mind to comprehend. I suggest you don't plunge yourself into these dangers too recklessly.
I'm able to make my own choices, sir. I don't need your permission.
start off with, I owe you an apology, Apprentice Emmett, and recognition that you were right and I've been too much of a coward during this investigation.
No one here's a coward, sir, but I appreciate the apology. I just think we need to be more brave in the face of darkness. Otherwise, what's the point of this foundation?
It's something that I admire you for. Even now, I have much to learn, and sometimes in unexpected ways.
And I've learned not to speak of that demon's name unless we are both prepared. We can't risk either of us being possessed. All of our recordings and documents could be erased if that would happen. At least that's what I think. Are you okay, sir?
Yes. Sorry again, Apprentice Emmett. Lost in thought.
Okay. Well, I suppose now that we're deep in the investigation, it's good to note that our actions, of what progress we made. Obviously, from the last session, there was quite a lot that happened. Since then, we've tried to lay low for a few days. It's been strangely quiet, at least on my end. I haven't heard any more of these disappearances, but the rumors among the town are kept to a dark whisper. It's like everyone's on edge now.
Rightfully so. We've pinpointed the demonic entity that this witch cult worships, and we know the location of their altar. This means that ultimately, if things go from bad to worse, that we must face the mountain spirit ourselves. Maybe just our presence can be enough to cause the spirit to flee to another location.
Instead of banishing it for good? I'm not sure if that's the result that we want.
It may not be what we want, but we can still track its movements if it does retreat. But this is all hypothetical. Banishing spirits is hard enough, even for lesser entities. Summoning them, on the other hand, can be easier. Spirits desire to inhabit the living. Demonic spirits seek to cause harm and chaos in addition to this.
Well, then our entry will be a good lesson on how summoning spirits can turn dark really quickly, even if it's through random dares.
Indeed, very dangerous. When one calls out to any spirit for answers or curiosity, all kinds of entities can answer back. Let us hear what kind of spirits were called in this instance.
Yes, of course. This entry was given to the Mystica Obscura Foundation about 5 years ago, but remains relevant to our current investigation. The result of what happened to 4 teenage friends is, well, depressing, to say the least. These 4 friends go by their first names: Tyler, Sarah, Noah, and Rebecca. It was here in Potter's Hill in the years that not too many paranormal incidents happened, but the rumors and dark tales still spread like wildfire. The elders grew worried about the trees and their shadows, while the young kids felt shivers whenever they listened to the ghostly tales of what occurred when the years were bad. Vanishing, rituals, and even deaths of many locals made Potter's Hill a place to avoid. But those who lived there stayed, perhaps not of necessity, but rather the truth of knowing that whatever plagued this town would follow them to the ends of the earth. A curse of the ethereal realm forever trapped in the bones of the townspeople. When the 4 friends of this story began to research and listen to the ghost stories all across the town, they became interested in the topic of the supernatural. They claimed that they weren't scared of ghosts, apparitions, and the undead. It would take more than just stories to frighten them. But eventually they delved too greedily into the paranormal and, in return, got in too deep in the perils of the unknown. It began with a foolish mistake of holding a seance in one of the friends' basement when they used a Ouija board and tall black candles. At first they gathered there thinking the board was just a hoax, a joke that added to the suspicions and guesses of what lay beyond the layers of human comprehension. On a weekend night, well past midnight, the friends sat in a circle while they began to light the candles one by one. Placing the board in the center of everyone, the tension was suddenly building. The planchette was placed on the board where they shifted it, and the planchette was placed on the board where it shifted, just a few inches, but in a moment where no one had yet laid their fingers on it. When the planchette moved, the flames on the candles moved also. But when nothing else happened, the friends blamed it on themselves fidgeting in place or cold drafts in the basement. After all, none of them had previous paranormal incidents, so no evil spirits had followed them there. Their strength in denying the spiritual realm, or rather their stubbornness, shut out the possibility of ethereal intervention. The friends put their fingers on the planchette and began to move it around, calling out to any spirits who were there, and if they could move something. They stopped the planchette and waited for a response. Nothing. The friends scoffed and Tyler put his hands away, laughing at the idea this was all a joke. He was about to stand up when another sudden gust went through the group and their laughs were silenced. Hesitating, Tyler placed his fingers back on the planchette. Once he did, the planchette began to move and the friends gasped in shock. Sliding over to the letter B and then A, the friends watched in stunned attention. It had stopped moving for now, but the flames on the candles moved again. There was a long time when nothing happened after that, but the friends were desperate for another sign. Eventually, Sarah called out to any other spirits to move a faraway door that was in front of her and behind Rebecca. She said the command 3 times loudly, and once she finished, the door creaked open slowly, revealing a pitch-black room in front of her. She didn't want to stare into the room, but she couldn't keep her eyes off the emptiness. Suddenly, with a loud slam, the door shut instantly, and the friends were beginning to tremble. Rebecca wanted to leave, but they hadn't said goodbye on the board yet. The rest of their friends said that they had plenty of evidence and experience to know the paranormal was definitely in their presence now. But when they tried to slide the planchette to the goodbye section of the board, it wouldn't budge. The friends blamed each other and demanded that this wasn't funny. The terror was done, and it was time to end the session. Suddenly, before any of them stood up, the planchette began to move again on its own. It slid over to E, and then to L. The friends were freaking out by now. The candles were blown out all at once, and there was an almost raspy, ethereal breath that everyone could hear. The same door from behind suddenly opened and slammed shut 3 times in a row. The wood on the stairs groaned as if someone was coming down. Rebecca stood up and with an unsteady voice shouted that she was leaving immediately and raced up the stairs with her eyes closed, followed closely by Tyler and then to Noah, who looked back at Sarah but ultimately decided to go back upstairs. Sarah was the only one left in the basement. Yet, despite her own terror, she pushed with all her might to move the planchette to goodbye. It was barely moving, but some progress was made. More whispers and eerie breaths surrounded her. She could hear her friend's footsteps upstairs, sprinting out in a panic. Steadying her breath, she pushed with both hands on the planchette, finally moving it to goodbye, where she demanded the spirit to leave now and to never return. A few lingering gusts blew through the basement again, and at last a faint whisper that seemed to flow out of the window. Then all was silent again. The planchette remained where it was. Sarah packed up the board and planchette back into a box and found a dusty shelf in the corner. Putting the box there under a stack of old books, she left the board there and went upstairs. Strangely enough, she didn't feel any presence in the basement, even right after their experience, but she still booked it back upstairs and sprinted to her room. Later that night, she called her friends, who had all made it home that night. She breathed a sigh of relief. It was just a scary experience that they'd laugh about later. Or at least, that's what she thought. A few days had passed before one of her friends went through something rather dramatic, and that she wouldn't talk to until those few days had passed. The first victim was Rebecca, whose experience happened the very same night of this Ouija board session. After telling Sarah she was home, Rebecca suddenly became extremely drowsy. Something in the air wasn't right. Her head was light and her vision was dizzy. After collapsing on the bed, Rebecca tossed and turned in the night, hearing voices but always too afraid to open her eyes. Eventually she did, and what she saw terrified her. At the foot of the bed, a pale face stared at her with misty gray eyes, unblinking. Thin strands of black hair drooped over the face, and she saw that a pair of its bony fingers were wrapped around the bedpost. The second Rebecca saw this entity, she screamed, except no sound came out. Her scream was silent. She was suddenly thrown back down on the bed while her body was unable to move. Sleep paralysis. Only this time, she was wide awake. She watched this pale entity creep around the bed, now holding a tiny candle with 2 of its bony fingers, black fingernails extending like talons. She remembered hearing a raspy breathing as the entity crept forward. slowly, inducing trauma and terror. The entity got right up to her face where its breath was icy cold, and gargled a strange sentence which she couldn't understand. But once it made that sound, it blew out the candle, and it vanished completely into thin air. The invisible hold on Rebecca was released, and she sprinted out of her room immediately. However, the more people she told about this encounter, the less believable she seemed. She told anyone that would listen to her. No one but her 3 friends would believe her. Noah listened to her intently and with fear. He too had seen the same figure, just in a different way. While Noah lived the farthest from Sarah's place, he saw the face of the pale figure appear and disappear between streets, in the reflections of windows, and in the canopies of rustling trees. He had to keep his head down at all times, but he heard the faint raspy voice, gargling and just trying to speak. Noah remembered it attempted to say actual words, but always seemed to jumble the words together or finish one halfway. Either way, the voices grew louder, and everywhere he looked, he saw that pale face come closer and closer. He panicked and followed the streets the best he could while looking down. Footsteps were heard behind him, running at a faster pace than him. He began to sprint as fast as he could until he rounded a corner and saw the nearby playground. There, behind the swing set, was the entity, hiding in a thick bush. It held the same small candle in its crooked fingers. The entity stared at Noah before giving a hushed signal with one of its fingers across its cracked lips. It smiled before blowing out the candle and vanishing into the night. Noah stood in absolute horror before stumbling his way home and crashing in his room. He stayed wide awake the rest of the night while he and Tyler shared their stories over a phone call. Tyler claimed that he saw the entity as well, though not as horrifying as the others. Tyler returned home without any incident and thought the whole thing was set up by his friends. While he was in bed watching movies late into the night, he began to notice something strange. Extra faces in the movies that he'd never noticed before. At first he brushed it off before he saw the same one over and over again. The pale face of the entity. It appeared far in the scene originally, but the closer to the ending of the movie, the closer the face would appear until the entire screen was filled up with just the entity, the pale face smiling its eerie grin while holding the candle. Tyler got up and yanked the cord from the TV, cutting the power immediately. But the TV turned back on, and the entity laughed with a gargled voice before snuffing out the flame of the candle, and the screen turned to black. All 3 of these friends witnessed this and told Sarah about it during the week, all before the 3 friends were considered mentally unstable. They began to wander into places randomly, muttering under their breath and always hiding in the darkest corners of any location, including their own houses and rooms. It seemed so unusual and tragic for the families. They had no idea why it was happening. Sarah, however, kept everything a secret. She knew the board was still in her house. She knew it was her fault for starting the seance, and her fault that she brought it up herself for a stupid dare. To this day, she keeps the blame to herself, but won't bring it up to her parents or her friends' families in fear that the pale entity is listening and watching her every move. As for the friends, all 3 of them speak just one phrase, no matter who they're talking to. I hunger, I crave, I devour. No progress has been made, and it is with unfortunate news that Sarah has disappeared, and it was a few months ago when this all happened. She has not been seen since.
A strong cautionary tale that is an example of what happens when average people reach out to things beyond their understanding.
It's just so terrible. I've noticed something similar to a few cases we've studied now, though. These evil entities choose to keep the victims alive, but in a constant state of stagnant confusion. They're able to stay alive through the help of those around them, but their mental state is elsewhere, lost to the wind.
To the winds of the ethereal plague that brings them closer to the demonic entity of which haunts this town. Additionally, this pale creature reminds me of 2 other entries which we've covered.
Yeah, exactly. The first being that pale creature who hunted down that hiker with the help of some invisible force, as well as the creature that crept into the attic of that teenager who stayed home alone for the weekend. They both seem to resonate that same sense of awestruck terror.
As well as the odd creature part of Potter's Hill ancient history, striking fear and even death in the townsfolk. There's no mention of the cult's triangle in this entry, however, so that's a curious factor.
Perhaps the demonic entity of the witch cult sends out multiple possessed creatures at once, on certain nights at least, and maybe some of these entities end up becoming lost of their cause. I'm not sure. It's just too ominous.
Like the Red Moon, to instill the most terror all at once and feed on the essence of fear, even over time. This may be a grave discovery.
Right. So, just so many victims that are stuck in that mental haze. It's truly horrifying to think of that. An entity that seeks to cause lifelong chaos and fear.
And some that are summoned by simple games and encouraged by teenage pranks. The realm of the ethereal can be closer than some may think.
Then we only have a limited time before this demonic entity strikes out again, just as ferociously as before. I'll be preparing for this tonight, and probably for the next few days too. The dangers of the paranormal are ominous.
The time will soon come when we must recite the cleansing incantation upon the darkness of the mountain. Are you prepared for this?
I believe so, yes. It's still a very daunting thing to do, but it has to be done. Otherwise, the disappearances and I guess these possessions will only increase tenfold. The Red Moon is in, 2 weeks or so. And so I'm anxious that it's just so close.
Then let's hope that we can do this soon. We know the path to the entrance, and we know the dangers of being caught. This demonic spirit must be banished at all costs.
Right. I agree, sir. Thanks to the Mystica Obscura Foundation, they've given us books and documents that involve cleansing incantations and rites of blessings. They've recently been in contact with us because they see how much danger we're in presently. From all the ethereal whisperings and hidden messages we've heard, the Foundation is highlighting the perils of Potter's Hill.
With their support and courageous hearts, we should be able to rid this problem. It also means we can return to our regular, occasional entries that are not as well malevolent.
Absolutely. Recently, the entities have been part of our entries have not really enjoyed our presence. If the entries stop after the next couple of sessions, well, it'll mean things went poorly, as somber as it sounds.
Dealing with the supernatural can be quite a somber topic. Hearing voices of the ethereal can cause most people to go insane. You've held up very well, Apprentice Emmit. I applaud your effort for staying for so long.
Thank you, sir. I just want to help these people, especially with the paranormal. A thing that most people tend to turn away from.
Or consider them to be mere folk tales or part of mythology. Fictional books or films of horror have swayed the minds of regular people to make them terrified of the unknown. Perhaps that's the reason why they make them.
I'd agree with that, yeah. I suppose we better get into the entry then. This one revolves around a local legend that actually proved to be a dark truth. Sometimes looking for fun in the wrong way can end up with terrible consequences. Well, I guess these voices won't stop. I'm not sure what they meant this time, however.
Nothing to worry about. It seems like some passing entities have emotions of their past selves that they can't let go of.
Well, yeah, I suppose so.
Let's delve into our entry now before we get too carried away.
Right, yes. My apologies. This entry centers around 3 friends who go by the names of Ryan, Derek, and Carrie. Though this occurred about 5 months ago, we haven't received this entry until now. Again, I'm not sure why the Foundation keeps hiding certain files from us, but it is our task to repeat the stories in order to stop this witch cult. This entry centers mainly around a piece of local folklore that proved to be true, at least for this group of friends. Other locals of Potter's Hill still claim it didn't happen the way that Ryan told everyone, but each suspicion is beginning to morph into truth. So perhaps this really did happen, and if it did, well, then we'll do our best to avoid this crossroad outside of the town. This incident started when Ryan called up his friends Derek and Carrie, who were a couple at the time, and told them about a certain local myth surrounding the hillside crossroads. The myth goes as follows. Going back around 20 years, there was a terrible car crash where the collision of two cars caused a very gruesome death of Amelia Grayson. After her funeral, which was a closed casket one because of her mangled body at the scene of death, it is said that many members of her family began to see her spiritual form at the very spot of her death. A shadow here or a distant voice there. At first, they thought she had come back to say her last goodbyes to everyone she knew and loved. But when she began to appear only at night, or demand dark requests, the family grew worried that the spirit wasn't really Amelia after all. Eventually, the Grayson family chose to ignore her death location, and where a small wooden cross would remain untouched for many years. However, despite the many cars driving by or the constant weather of rain or snow over the next few years, that same wooden cross would remain in the same condition, almost like new, as if it were barely placed there the day before. A rumor of Amelia started to grow about 5 years after her death. Disappearances along the road were popping up. The odd thing about these vanishings was that it always involved couples. Cars stalled in the middle of the crossroads at night, where the couple would be stranded there. The spirit of Amelia would then appear, and with a ferocious vengeance, whisk them away to, well, who knows where. The myth continues that the spirit of Amelia takes the faces of women to restore her beauty, and she takes the men to keep with her forever. Some blood has been seen at the vanishing sites, along with their empty and sometimes still running car, but the bodies of these couples have never been found. Finally, the myth ends that in order to summon Amelia yourself, if you are so brave, you can perform a few simple steps. First, drive out onto the crossroads before sunset, and park your car at the center of the roads. Since no one really drives out there anymore out of fear, you should be fine with watching for traffic. Second, walk up to the wooden cross and call out to Amelia's spirit. It doesn't have to be in a specific direction, just so long as you touch that wood. Third, wait until sunset in your car and watch the sun go down. Once this happens, keep a watch in the fields that surround the roads. The figure of Amelia appears in the tall grass, waiting for daring adventurers to come close to her. When this happens, start your car and immediately drive away. If your car doesn't start and it won't budge, run. This summoning ritual is not to be performed by the unprepared. Without the correct items of divine protection, those who try to summon Amelia's spirit will disappear like the rest. This kind of local folklore bled through the town of Potter's Hill year after Amelia's death. The three friends of the story were in their second year of college when they heard about this tale. Originally from Potter's Hill, the friends had dreams of moving away, but each summer they were brought back to the town, like a sense of urgency in their hearts that they needed to come back. Eventually, the friends met together one day for old time's sake, and once they all agreed they'd heard the haunting story of Amelia one way or another, they chose to try the challenge out for themselves. After all, it was just folklore, right? Just another piece of mysterious layers of a strange town. It was on a Saturday evening that the friends met together and piled into Derek's car to see if these legends were true or just tall tales. It was just before sunset when they reached the infamous crossroads. Just driving over the hill and seeing the roads before them gave the friends instant chills. The previous banters and jokes along the way there had stopped instantly. But Derek continued driving and parked the car directly in the center of the crossroads. Carrie was the quietest among the three. She looked in every direction as if expecting some spectral image of an old woman to pop up and scare them away from their daring adventure. Even as they were parked, she said nothing but kept her eyes open. Ryan felt as if his words were stuck in his throat, trying to recite the steps so that everyone in the car could understand them. Derek got out of the car first, announcing that they all needed to go up and touch the wooden cross where Amelia's scene of death occurred. Both Ryan and Carrie were hesitant, but they had come all this way for the dare. They couldn't stop now. Silently, the friends approached the wooden cross and stood there for a moment. It was true. The wood appeared like it had barely been dug into the ground that day. No sign of weather-worn cracks or loose splinters. Even the ground underneath was fresh green. It was an odd sight to see, but the friends knelt down and placed their hands on the wooden cross. And as they did, they called out to Amelia, announcing their presence and asking for hers to appear before them. They looked up to see that the sun was just about to set, and they sprinted back to their car. No words were shared as they ran back. The sensation that something was already there and watching them was in their panicked breaths. Slamming the doors shut and locking them, the friends were breathing heavily as they watched the last light of the day fade. The tall grass of the fields swayed side to side, suddenly moving quicker while the wind picked up. The howls of the night air made the friends uneasy at once. Their hearts pounded as they gazed through the fields, waiting to see if anything would show up. Derek and Carrie watched the fields ahead, while Ryan looked behind. There wasn't anything yet, but once the sun was completely down and the night had just begun, that was when Ryan spotted something. Rather than ahead of them, which Derek and Carrie thought it would be, as the wooden cross was right there, Ryan saw not with his own eyes, but in the mirror of the car, a misty black figure. Hidden in the waving tall grass, the figure appeared and disappeared in quick vanishing moments, allowing the grass to cover its movements. It was so quick that Ryan could barely react. His eyes were glued to the mirror as the misty figure crept closer to the car. He could see wavy black hair now, and a pair of glowing white eyes, never blinking, and focusing on the friends, and on him. Ryan barely let out a panicked report when his body was suddenly held down by an invisible force, and his words were silenced. The screams were silent, even as he tried to shout. Cold hands gripped his wrists and ankles while he was trapped. He was forced to watch what happened. Once Derek and Carrie whipped around to see Ryan struggling with himself, they saw the misty figure of Amelia glide towards the car, almost right against the back window now. With trembling hands, Derek fumbled for the keys and attempted to start the car. Sputters from the engine. It turned over and over. Derek swore under his breath while Carrie yelled at him to hurry up. The shadowy figure drifted over to the car now and, with an unusual, jerky movement, poked her head above to peek inside. Derek and Carrie yelled at such a horrific sight. Ryan screamed too, but nothing was inside. Derek and Carrie yelled at such a horrific sight. The shadowy figure... The shadowy figure drifted over to the car now, and with an unusual jerky movement, poked her head above to peek inside. Derek and Carrie yelled at such a horrific sight. Ryan screamed too, but nothing was heard. What they all saw was the mangled face of a younger woman. Half of her face was sunken in, like a weight had smashed into her face and carved a crater into the skull. Loose skin hung from a bloody patch of pulsing muscles. Her once visible eye was bloodshot and unblinking. Her open mouth was nothing but a jawbone and scattered teeth. As the misty figure opened its mouth, it made an awful wheezing sound, as if it were sucking in the night air itself. Instead, Derek froze in place and suddenly slumped in the seat. Carrie shook him to wake up, but nothing worked. The figure breathed in again. From Derek's mouth, a thin wave of faint blue light connected from him to the figure. Ryan couldn't believe it, but he swore he saw the same figure as Derek, but in that same faint blue light, being dragged towards the burial grounds of Amelia. As this unfolded, the figure crashed its blackened and taloned hands straight through the glass and grasped at the throat of Carrie. Pulling through the shattered glass, the figure dragged Carrie over through the car and towards her grave. Ryan was still stuck, but he could hear the desperate cries of his friends, begging to be let go and crying for Ryan to help. But the more he struggled, the more the cold hands would freeze his body, sending sharp, icy touches like blade cuts all across his chest and back. Once the cries of Carrie began to lessen, he looked up one last time to see the figure of Amelia taking the struggling body of Carrie and forcing her into the very grounds of Amelia's marker. Before it disappeared, the figure snapped its mangled head back at Ryan, pointing its taloned fingers at him. Ryan claims that he heard the voice of Amelia in his head, demanding that he should never return or else receive the same fate as his friends. The car was suddenly turned on, and the body of Derek fell out of the car. Thick vines came from under the earth and swallowed Derek into the ground, never to be seen again. Ryan's body was released, and he gasped for breath. The headlights shined upon the wooden cross again, and all around him was silent, except for the running engine. Ryan panicked and climbed into the driver's seat, speeding away as fast as he could. But even as he drove away, he looked behind him in the mirror and guessed that he saw the last vines snake their way into the earth, making sure that neither Derek nor Cassie would ever be found. Before going back home, Ryan stopped the car and wept. He cried for what seemed like hours. Childhood friends, years of close bonding, all gone in one night. Ryan returned to college, but not the same as he once was. He became sullen, depressed, and his mood slunk into a dark pit that never recovered. Failing his classes, Ryan went back to his parents. This was a few months ago, and his appearances have not been cited since. Another troubling and very sad outcome of curiosity.
Some parts of folklore may prove to be true. This spirit of Amelia seems to be a demonic force masquerading as the thought of Amelia, hoping to drag unfortunate victims closer to its hunting grounds.
I thought so too, sir. Even with local legends, I'd rather be, safe than sorry. It's very sad to know this outcome. I'm sure Ryan is having such a difficult time dealing with this, if he's still out there.
Tempting dark forces to come forward without knowing what it is and without protection is more than just a simple dare. It's dealing with these forces that know all about our human nature, while we know the bare minimum of what they are through guesses and speculations. Our best hope now is that Ryan is doing fine and is under constant watch. Otherwise, he will be the next victim caused by curiosity.
At least we know to avoid these roads. There's so many places around the town to avoid now. Doesn't that seem odd?
I suppose that is. This demonic entity that the witch cult worships controls lesser demons. Because of this, and from what we've been reporting, it may be that they are cornering specific locations and trap unfortunate victims by thinning the boundaries, which is why we must be successful in reciting our cleansing incantations.
Another ritual?
We have less time than I thought. This worries me.
What should we do?
Prepare for the worst. Our final confrontation lies ahead, much too soon. This may be too close to the rising of the red moon. I do not suggest that we go forward with this session.
The Foundation needs everything that connects to our cases, sir, and this entry is extremely vital information.
As long as we hurry with the session, we cannot waste time on such a limited schedule.
Again, the information provided is needed for our cases. The stories are told because the victims are frightened out of something they can't understand. Additionally, even though the red moon is fast approaching, I felt it necessary to include this session. I have all the correct incantations to perform, and I've practiced them for many nights now. I'm ready, sir.
I still don't like it, but...
If you don't like it, then you don't have to be a part of it. I'm sorry, sir, but I've done enough research and have had experiences of my own to lead this investigation, even if you don't approve.
Very well. If you truly believe that you can do it on your own, then proceed with this entry while I prepare for the actual danger ahead.
You're giving me everything necessary for the upcoming trial. I'd appreciate it if you'd stay for the session, but are you really going to leave? I just said if you can. Well, I I didn't really expect that to happen once we're recording. He wasn't he didn't act like this before, but I suppose from what I've discovered about him, maybe my guesses were true. Maybe he's not the true Joseph Steele that I read about. Regardless of his actual identity, I do think it's necessary to begin this entry. I know the red moon is near, but I hope this may shine some light on a few dark secrets about the town of Potter's Hill. Seems like, well, I suppose anything could be watching us. I mean, well, me. It'll be strange to record an entry alone, but here it goes. This entry comes from another local here in Potter's Hill. Originally, it just started with a child of a new family who recently bought a house that needs a lot of renovation. But through some very eerie incidents, the entire family quietly came to us about the happenings. Starting from the beginning, the family, who chooses to remain anonymous on the reporting, purchased a house on the outskirts of the town, one that needed some fixing, as I mentioned, but also one that is close to the forest and ultimately close to the mountain. The family moved in and the first few weeks went by quite well. Some rooms weren't finished, however, and the sleeping arrangements had to be shuffled around. One of these times, the youngest son had to switch his bed to a downstairs room, which was a half-finished basement, while his main bedroom was being fixed entirely. It was during this time that the son began to not only hear faint whisperings at night from beneath the bed or underneath the stairs, but also a smell that was awful. At first, the son didn't report it until the smell became almost unbearable to sleep through, let alone to be inside the room at all. But when the parents came down one night, the stench had lessened and the son was confused and scared. The parents thought it was some old food stashed away by the son and he had forgotten about it. But when they checked the drawers and shelves, nothing was found. That night and the next, the son slept in the living room. But eventually, the parents had him sleep back in the basement. However, the son could hardly sleep at all. More whispers returned as well as the rancid odor. But the son wouldn't have to tell his parents about it again. The father came down one night to check on extra tools he had left there, and immediately noticed the smell. He entered the son's room and traced the smell down to a tall wardrobe that had been left behind by the previous owner. An owner whom the family had never met, and thought it was really strange. Either way, the father located the wardrobe and found a loose board at the back. With a strong push, the wall of the opposite side was broken through, and what the father found made him retrace his steps, pushing his son further back. Inside the wardrobe, or at the back of it, was an entrance to an entire different room, cold and damp. It was walled off by bricks for the most part, but the entrance seemed like it had been broken open. By what or who, the father couldn't tell, and he didn't want to know. He made his son go back upstairs, and while he ran up, the mother bumped into him, where she leaned in and saw the horrible truth that their son wasn't making it up. Both of the parents began to hear the same whisperings the son did. Listening, they picked up certain words, most of them with negative feelings. Trapped. Dark. Blood. It was so much at once, but something seemed to draw them forward to reveal the secrets underneath. Finding some flashlights, the parents went back into the dark room. Before plunging back into the terrifying room, they noticed an odd symbol painted in white above the entrance, a double triangle with a line jutting vertically through both of them. The symbol of Balfamor.
Careful.
I can't be afraid, Nat. Not now. Just like the parents. I have to be brave. Because those horrific secrets of the house were terrible to read about. Anyway, inside the first room, it was mostly empty with some shelves on the walls. On the shelves, though, were disturbing items. Knives, spades, broken glass jars, and various gardening tools that were all stained with blood. On the opposite wall, there were two metal doors, both without a lock. It was strange, but the father approached the right one while the mother approached the left. As the father opened the door, he was overwhelmed by an awful and horrific stench, worse than that was before. Not just this, but an enormous wave of heat wafted through the room. The father lifted his arms in disgust and pain, and he gasped at what he saw and nearly threw up. In the room was a large furnace, burning bright and blowing hot, rancid air. In front of the furnace, though, was a pile of corpses. Most of them were pale and decomposing, like they had been stacked there for weeks, if not months. Flies and maggots covered the bodies, digging into them. The horrible stench of the decomposing bodies mixed with the fire, which the father had presumed to be the final stage of these bodies, made him slam the door shut and throw up in the colder room. The mother rushed over to him while he recounted the horrible scene. She looked over to the door with horror, but didn't open it. She didn't want to see what the worst of humanity could do. Instead, she helped her husband back to his feet and lead him over to the left door. Peering inside, they could both see an extremely long stone tunnel that seemed to go on for miles ahead. However, plastered on the walls nearest to the door were papers upon papers of missing person reports. They couldn't count them all, but the parents guessed there to be at least 50 from what they could see. It didn't take them long to shut the door and retreat back through the gold entrance. Stumbling back through the wardrobe, they closed off the room permanently to protect their son and their family from ever experiencing something that awful. They weren't sure where to go to report this. They went to the police first, and they did up investigating the basement. But by the time the police had arrived, the smell had lessened again, and when the officers went through the broken wall and into the hidden chambers, they claimed there were no bodies there, and the shelves were completely empty. The horrible smell was definitely still there, but anything left over was not. The fires of the furnace were out, but the posters of the missing people remained on the walls past the left door. Later, the officers closed off the house for investigation, and the family ended up moving away a month after the investigation had started. That was when the house slowly began to be visited and investigated less each week. It was like the detectives either didn't find anything, or their focus shifted to something else. A very strange and sudden shift that left the investigation open since then. The house has been left abandoned since the last detectives left the grounds. Now, the vanishings and recent disappearances began to lessen after this macabre incident, but the truth behind it all was entirely horrifying. The family came to us, loosely knowing what the Mystic Obscure Foundation does through some connections, and wanted to remain completely unknown from what they discovered. It definitely makes sense. Well, since then, the family is living somewhere else, renting for now, until they can move away from Potter's Hill entirely. I'm just so used to having Mr. Steele say something right after. Well, this story is definitely extremely dark and not what I expected to read through the first time. It was so jarring that I'm planning to visit this house actually on my own. Since Mr. Steele doesn't want to have actual investigation for all of these separate cases, I've tried to do my own work on the side to try to follow up on these. So, knowing that this witch cult symbol is the very same that the family had found, it's another huge lead to follow. We can't have any more roadblocks now. We have a set goal, and we have so many leads that we can't fumble this opportunity. But, among all this information, the most mysterious one is, I suppose, the truth behind Mr. Steele. I'm not sure if he's the real one, so to speak, or just another person pretending to be him. And it might be worse. Maybe he's some kind of skinwalker, if the folklore is real. There's so many discoveries I've made that just don't make sense, while other things that the Foundation has known but has covered up. Secrets. Perhaps even these spirits that keep watching me know all about it too. Well, I'm about to find out what's beyond the walls of that house. It's time to be the bravest that I can.
I apologize if I haven't updated my journey tonight, but I was able to sneak into the same house in this entry and found the basement pretty easy. I didn't want to start recording in case of any of those cult members or maybe even some detectives see me or hear me. But I did find the furnace, which was off, and the shelves were empty. The missing people on the posters, though, were still there. There's quite a collective of those posters, and there was a few further down past that. Since then, I've just been walking straight, just in this really dark tunnel. There's no doors or hidden openings. I'm taking my time so I don't miss anything, but this might take a while, just to walk the length of the tunnel. Reporting back soon, I hope.
I'll try to make this brief, but there's some startling new discoveries here. I'm outside in the forest, at the foot of the mountains. This tunnel apparently leads to the trails that go up to the entrance of the mountain. The triangular entrance is in front of me now, maybe 100 feet away. I don't want to approach it just yet. I didn't bring my cleansing items, but I know how to get here now. Additionally, there's many etchings of the same symbol of this witch cult carved into the stone ground at the start of the tunnel, or rather, the end of it now. As odd as that is, most of these carvings are filled with what I guess to be blood. 3 of these etchings are left empty, but I fear this cult only needs 3 more victims to fulfill some sort of dark ritual. It's just all so ominous. It might be too much for me to handle on my own. Someone's close by. I didn't see them before. I'll be watching who... Wait. Is that... No, it can't be. There's a couple of cultists wearing the white robes from previous entries, but they don't have the hoods up now, and one of them is Mr. Steele. But he appears wrong. His face isn't, well, it isn't the same, but he's digging into the earth now, looking for something that's deep in the ground, and it can't be. The heart of the forest. It's just like he said. A pulsing, beating heart dug into the earth. This isn't Mr. Steele at all. It can't be. I can't stay here much longer. I'll report back soon, and I hope I can make it back. Update over. So this won't necessarily be an entry, as there is no story to tell, except for mine. The journey that I'll be partaking in. I'll do my best to make sense of each entry that we've told so far and attempt to connect the dots here. I've noticed similar patterns and events that are both obvious and elusive. This town is far from regular, and it has been for years now. And even with countless spirits roaming around in the shadows, I have to push through in order to have the truth be told. First of all, and this must be said as I've slowly put it together over some sessions, but now that I'm very positive of this theory, that the Joseph Steele that I've been recording with is not the true Joseph Steele, but rather a skinwalker that needed some information or maybe another possible victim about the witch cult. Not necessarily the location that he was after, I guess, but rather what made each victim suffer under each macabre situations. It's like the skinwalker enjoys the pain of others through physical torment or drastic nightmares. Retelling the entries made it stay put each session, seemingly reliving the victim's terrifying incidents. I'm just surprised I didn't see the signs before. Well, I'll have to make this somewhat brief then if these sounds and notes continue. It may be that this calling for the cult to gather together again, it will most likely be tonight. And like I've mentioned in the previous sessions with, well, I suppose with Joseph Steele, that this cult follows and worships this deity called Balefamor, a demonic entity that revolted against its master and now has a growing fellowship of dark followers. The spirit of this demonic entity is inside the mountain, and at the very feet of these same mountains is where the rituals take place. Anyone who is willing to give themselves up is to give up their past life, the burning of their self-care, so to speak. Those who are unwilling and are forcibly captured are there for darker purposes. It seems that whenever someone joins this force, a larger fire erupts, pleasing the entity. The lone horn notes, however, remain a mystery to me. There aren't any notes about it in Mr. Steele's books or papers, but I fear that the music heard from the mountains can spell something worse than what's happening. It may be that this entity is calling out to other dark spirits in hope to gain control of the entire town, but that's only speculation. There are eyes watching me this very moment. I can't stay here. Time is against me. It's time. I have to be brave. I'm getting closer to the mountains, but I found something very odd. There seems to be some sort of vault hidden in the woods underneath a trapdoor. I went inside briefly as there hasn't been any additional sounds, but I only needed a little while inside those vaults. Apparently, Mr. Steele has more secrets that just keep stacking on top of each other. I suppose back when Joseph Steele was alive and active, from what I can think, he was definitely part of the Mystica Obscura Foundation. At least, that's where he began. There were markings on the vault that read Cinderport. If that's true, then this city of Cinderport it's hundreds of miles away and where the Foundation's main base is. Well, from what I could gather, Mr. Steele stole some of these trapped spirits and ran away from the Foundation, only to release the worst demons in the book on a town that already had suspicions of paranormal activity. The Mr. Steele of the Foundation is almost as worse as the Skinwalker. Perhaps it's the reason why it chose him in the first place.
You've wandered too far, Apprentice Emmit.
Give up the charade, beast. I know what you are.
Please, Emmit. Let's end this cult's activity together, like we said we would.
Stop it. The act is over. I know you're a skinwalker. The real Joseph Steele vanished years ago.
I only made it seem that way. I had to lay low for a long time. Certain people were after me during that time.
You mean the Foundation? The very people you chose to run away from? The ones who started this whole group back in Cinderport?
How much do you know? What other secrets are you hiding?
Hiding? You've kept so many secrets from me, and now you want to know what I've just discovered? I can't keep this on. You are a skinwalker. You're not the true Joseph Steele. You only wanted me to come with you, to stop this cult out of layers of lies. I now know I was meant to be one of the last victims, to be sacrificed to this demonic entity. I've seen you with this cult.
And what will you do if my patience wears off?
Be brave in the face of death. I know where the heart is. The heart of the forest. I need to stop him before it grows worse.
You have nowhere to hide.
This can't be happening. This can't be happening. This can't be happening.
What chance do you think you have? All will perish under the domain of Beelzebub. All will burn in flame and fumes.
I need to make sure this shot counts. Okay, I know the heart is near. It was a good thing I stumbled upon that meeting a few nights ago. I'll stab the heart. It's what can stop this curse, the Skinwalker.
You can't hide, Emmett. We will find you.
Here it is. Here it is. The heart of the forest. I can't let this evil win. I won't let it survive. Here it is. Yes. The one and only. It's the heart. It's so obscure. I don't know how to truly explain it in words. It's light in my hands, but the aura is heavy. This is otherworldly magic to try to explain it. An anomaly at a cosmic scale.
And too great an item for you to hold. Give it over and I will consider sparing you.
No. This can't be it. Why another fire? Why? What?
Yes, you've failed again. Weak-minded, timid, and scared. This is why your kind becomes such an easy prey. And when the rule of Baltimore begins, much sooner than you thought, the earth itself will crack into an open grave.
I won't let that happen. My time is not over yet. The power of the demoniac is great, but the fire of the true light is greater. Let this be your warning unless you wish to lose your heart.
Too comprehensive for human understanding. But no matter, this is your end.
If it is, then it will be our end. Together.
Hunger, crave, devour.